Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something beautifully strange, ancient, and just a little bit overwhelming. The entire pantheon of Egyptian gods. That's right, all of them. Or at least as many as humanly possible before you drift off into a peaceful deity-filled dream. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. Not like physically, you'll be fine, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, this is going to get weird fast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, I won't smite you or anything if you don't. And hey, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I always love seeing where our sleepy little cult of history nerds is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin in nothing. No gods, no pyramids, no desert sun, just a watery chaos. You're floating, except there's no you, not really, no body, no thoughts, no time, just a shapeless ocean of potential, like the moment right before a dream begins. This primeval nothingness is called none, and it's not empty. It's full of the possibility of everything. It's the silence before the first word, the darkness before the stars blink awake, and then something shifts. Somehow from the stillness, Atum emerges. Nobody's sure how. Maybe he willed himself into being. Maybe he rode a bubble of a sheer divine ego to the surface. The myths don't totally agree. And frankly, neither do the scholars. Some say Atum was just the first form of Ra, the sun god. Others say he was his own thing, a self-made creator with vibes of both chaos and order. But here he is, Atum Mo, standing alone on a small hill that's just appeared above the waters. This mound is called the Ben, and it becomes a sacred symbol, the prototype for every pyramid that'll be built later. You can almost feel it under your feet now, solid, ancient, and rising from the endless wet. Atum looks around and realizes he's, well, lonely. There's no one to talk to, no one to listen to his monologues about cosmic purpose. So, in a move that is equal parts poetic and frankly kind of gross, he decides to create other beings. From himself. Depending on which version you prefer, he either sneezes them out or takes matters into his own divine hands, if you catch my drift. Egyptian myths don't shy away from bodily functions. You've been warned. Out of this sacred exhalation, or divine solo performance, two beings come into the world, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. They're twins, of course, because nothing in Egyptian mythology happens one at a time. Duality is kind of the whole deal, male and female, sky and earth, order and chaos. The Egyptians are all about balance. The arrival of Shu and Tefnut marks the first crack in the quiet. Air begins to move, moisture swirls, the watery void starts to shimmer with motion and breath. Atum watches his children with godly pride, until they get lost. Yep, first kids in the universe, and he misplaces them. Apparently they go wandering off into the endless chaos, as one does when you've just been sneezed into existence and there's literally no map, no gravity, and no life coaches. Atum, panicking a little, sends out his eye, a living extension of himself, to find them. The Eye of Ra, sometimes shown as a fierce lioness, zips off into the cosmos to bring them home. Eventually the twins return and Atum is so overjoyed he cries, where his tears fall. Humans begin to sprout up. Yes, we're made from god tears. Sweet, huh? Kind of poetic, kind of emo. And now, things start accelerating. Shu and Tefnut fall in love, again twins, and have their own kids, Geb the earth and Nut. Nut the sky. But that's for later. For now, we're lingering in this bizarre moment between nothing and something, where gods are birthed from loneliness and air and moisture swirl in a dance that's equal parts scientific and spiritual. Now here's your quirky fact of the night. Some lesser-known myths suggest that Atum didn't create the world out of chaos at all, but rather that he was the chaos. In this interpretation, he doesn't rise from Nun, he is Nun, taking shape. Imagine being both the problem and the solution. Peak god energy. And scholars? They still don't fully agree on what Atum even is. Is he the sun? Is he just Ra in disguise? Is he a philosophical concept made flesh? Egyptologists argue about this like it's a heated episode of a very niche Netflix drama. No clear answer. just a lot of stone carvings, half-erased myths, and dusty scrolls that say, probably this, but maybe that. Still, you're standing here now at the start of it all, watching creation hiccup into existence, feeling air and mist curl around your fingers. Somewhere in the distance, the Eye of Ra gleams like a searchlight cutting through the void. The gods are coming, all of them, and you're going to meet every last one, but first, take a breath. You've just survived the birth of the universe. So now you're standing there, still damp from the cosmic waters of Nun, probably a little dazed. You've just witnessed a god spit out two other gods. Honestly, welcome to Egyptian mythology. It only gets weirder from here. Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture, are kind of vibing now. They've got this whole elemental romance thing going. They're swirling around each other in the first proto-atmosphere, dancing in currents of wind and mist. And you're floating there too, like a feather scar stuck in a divine weather pattern. But don't worry, you're not in danger. This is bedtime mythology. You're just along for the ride. Now Shu, the god of air, is that calm breath before a sandstorm. The thing that separates earth from sky, the reason everything isn't just mushed together in one moist cosmic sandwich. His symbol is the ostrich feather. And yeah, there's a whole thing about feathers in Egyptian myth. Lightness, truth, judgment. But we'll get to that in a few sections. For now, just picture Shu as tall, calm, and kind of emotionally distant. Literally, he's air. No hugs. Tefnut, on the other hand, is moisture. Think dew in the morning or that soft mist that clings to your skin before a summer storm. She's got cat-like features in some depictions, sometimes a lioness, sometimes fully human, with a solar disk on her head. She's warmth and wetness and that weirdly comforting feeling of being a little damp but not soaked. Together they start shaping the environment. It's not the Earth as you know it yet, but it's beginning to form. Somewhere in the swirling mist, the first outlines of the world begin to settle. Eventually these two do what mythological couples do. They have kids, and they don't mess around. They birth the literal earth and sky. Their son Geb becomes the ground beneath your feet. You'll meet him more closely in a minute. Their daughter Nut becomes the arched sky above, stretching from horizon to horizon like a blue-black goddess doing yoga over the planet. But for now, Shu and Tefnut are still centre stage, and they're bickering. Yep, according to some versions of the myth, Shu and Tefnut don't exactly have a perfect relationship. There are cycles of separation and reunion, storms and peace. Think of them as cosmic weather patterns that also happen to be deeply codependent. Some scholars think this reflects the Egyptian experience of the environment. Dry desert winds one season, life-giving humidity the next. Their relationship is literally the weather. Now here's the fun part. Shu isn't just air in the modern sense. He's the space between things, the breath that separates life from death, the tension between matter and spirit. So when Shu stands between Geb and Nut, his own kids, mind you, it's not just parental intervention, it's cosmic balance enforcement. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's back up to when Shu and Tefnut go missing, which, as you'll remember, caused Atum to panic so hard he cried humans into existence. There's something poetically tragic about that. The first beings he creates out of loneliness immediately vanish into the formless void, and all he can do is send his cosmic eyeball after them. Maybe this was the universe's first lesson in parenting. Your children will always wander, and you'll always cry. When Shu and Tefnut return, they've changed. They're no longer just vague elemental forces. They have form, identity, and, somehow, opinions. They've started shaping things without even meaning to. The air swells and churns, moisture condenses and drips, and suddenly, time feels real. Motion matters. The void is no longer infinite. It has depth and breath and humidity. That's the real start of creation. Not just things existing, but things interacting. Here's your quirky fact for the night. In one fringe version of the myth, Shu doesn't just separate sky and earth. He actually holds up the sky himself, forever, like a celestial gym bro with great posture. In some temple reliefs, he's literally lifting Nut above his head, legs in a deep squat, arms extended, no breaks. He's got the whole sky on his shoulders, swole air god. But even that image is debated. Some scholars argue that Shu holding up Nut is a late artistic invention, and in older myths his role is more symbolic than literal. He doesn't lift Enming Gusung, he just exists as the separator. Others point to hymns and coffin texts that describe him battling the weight of the heavens daily. The truth? We don't actually know, but it makes a great mental picture, this god just silently doing overhead presses for eternity. Back to the story. Shu and Tefnut finally settle down. They establish the laws of nature just by being there. Air moves a certain way, moisture gathers, rain becomes possible, and with those two forces balanced, the world can start to coalesce. You feel it now, a dry wind brushing one cheek, a soft mist kissing the other. Creation isn't loud or dramatic here. It's slow, patient, like the tide creeping in while you nap, but don't get too comfy in their stillness. Shu and Tefnut have set the stage for even more dramatic offspring. You've barely scratched the surface of what these gods are capable of. In fact, while you were admiring the cosmic weather, Geb and Nut were already forming themselves out of the mist and dust. And Atum? He's watching. Maybe proud, maybe exhausted. He was alone once, now he's the grandfather of the universe. Things are happening too fast, even for a gear. As you close your eyes in this breathy, watery place, hanging between the sky that's coming and the earth that's not yet, you realise something. Egyptian mythology isn't about gods in the clouds throwing lightning bolts. It's about elements taking shape, becoming aware, and then getting into incredibly dramatic family arguments that somehow define the laws of physics and emotion. It's weird, it's wonderful, and it's only just beginning. You barely have time to catch your breath when the next divine drama unfolds. Shu and Tefnut, now experienced elemental parents with questionable boundary-setting skills, give birth to two more cosmic forces, Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. And not just in the poetic sense. These aren't abstract concepts anymore. They're full-on deities with bodies, personalities, and the kind of complicated sibling dynamic that would make a therapist rich. You find yourself standing on Geb now, or rather, in him. The god of the earth isn't just lying there passively, he is the land itself. His brownish-green skin is cracked like dried riverbeds, his spine a chain of mountains stretching into the hazy distance. Every time you take a step, you feel the slight rumble of his laughter, or maybe irritation. Geb's personality is grounding, pun intended, serious, but not without humour. He knows his job is to hold it together, literally. Above you, stretching from horizon to horizon, is Nut, and she's breathtaking. Her body arches overhead in a perfect backbend, painted in deep blue with tiny golden stars scattered across her skin. Her fingertips touch the east. Her toes point west. It's like you're lying in a giant human snow globe. Or maybe she's lying over you. She doesn't speak, but you can hear her thoughts in the rush of wind and the rustle of stars. She's protective, distant, and endlessly maternal. And here's the thing, Geb and Nut are madly in love, which is great except for one tiny cosmic issue. They're siblings. Not that this bothers the ancient Egyptians, whose gods seem to operate under the motto, incest, but make it divine. Still, their love is strong, passionate, and for a brief moment in the myth, completely uninterrupted. The earth and the sky are wrapped in an eternal embrace, holding each other so tightly that nothing else can exist. That's a problem. See, Atum, or Ra, depending on the version, looks down at this celestial cuddle fest and has a divine meltdown. He realises that if Geb and Nut stay like this, fused together in love, there'll be no room for life. No day, no night, no air to breathe, just an eternal, awkward cosmic hug. So Atum commands Shu, their father, to separate them. And this is the moment everything changes. You feel it before you see it. The pressure of being between two deities suddenly eases. Shu, the air, lifts Nut high above, pushing her upward until she stretches across the sky like a canopy. Geb shudders beneath your feet as he's forced to flatten out, sprawling into valleys and plains. The separation is painful, necessary, and some say eternal. Shu stands between them, arms raised forever, holding his children apart. Some myths say Nut cries every evening as the sun departs from her grasp. Others say Geb rumbles in longing when he hears her laugh in the wind. Either way, their separation becomes the foundation of space, time, and life. You're now in a world with days and nights, seasons and silence, and it all comes from a family breakup. Here's your historical nugget. In Egyptian cosmology, this separation wasn't just a story, it was architecture. Temples were designed with ceilings painted like Nut, walls and columns as Shu, and the floors as Geb. The very structure of sacred spaces mirrored the divine family drama. When you entered a temple, you weren't just going to pray, you were stepping inside the myth itself. And for your quirky fact of the night, Nut didn't just hold up the sky. She was also believed to swallow the sun each evening and give birth to it every morning. Yep. Every night, Ra sails into her mouth in his sunboat, travels through her starry belly, and is reborn at dawn. Talk about dedication. Imagine birthing a giant flaming orb every single day. No coffee, no thank you. Now, scholars debate quite a bit about who's actually in charge in this part of the mythology. Some say Shu is the real power here, holding everything together and making the world possible. Others argue it's Nut, whose body contains the entire celestial realm. And then there's Geb, grounding the whole thing in reality. Egyptian mythology doesn't do main characters the way we're used to. It's more like an ensemble cast where everyone's got their moment to shine, or break the universe. So you're here now, standing on Geb, looking up at Nut, breathing in Shu. The world has form, the sky has boundaries, the earth is something you can touch, and for the first time the conditions for life have been met. Plants sprout, rivers twist like silver threads through Geb's body, stars begin to shift across Nut's skin. Time starts ticking, gently at first, then faster. But love doesn't die just because gods are forcibly separated. In secret, Nut and Geb continue their romance. Somehow, don't ask how, Nut becomes pregnant. And here comes the next problem. Atum, still salty about the whole love fest, curses her. He declares that she cannot give birth on any day of the year. Classic divine move. You don't like what your kids are doing, so you rewrite the rules of the calendar. But Nut is clever. She teams up with Thoth, the god of wisdom and moonlight, and together they game the system. Thoth plays a cosmic game of dice with the moon and wins 5 extra days not technically part of the year. During these forbidden days, Nut gives birth to 5 children, and you'll meet them very soon. But for now, look around. The world has shape, the gods are forming families, and you're standing in the middle of a myth that explains everything, from why the sun rises to why your ceiling looks the way it does. Don't rush ahead. Take a moment. Feel Geb beneath you. Let the stars of Nut warm your cheeks. Let Shu's eternal exhale pass through your lungs. This is where myth becomes a memory. This is where existence begins. You're standing at the edge of something big now. The sky has been lifted, the earth is stable, and the air, Shu, is holding it all together, arms aching in divine silence. But even in this calm, there's something building in the space between sky and land. A whisper of coming stories. You can feel it like thunder just behind the hills. And right there, in the most secret stolen moments of twilight, Nut the sky does the unthinkable. She gives birth. Not once, but 5 times. 5 children, 5 gods are born on 5 days that don't technically exist, extra calendar slots conjured by Thoth's clever moon gambling. You'll meet them all soon, but tonight one rises to the top like a green sprout through desert sand. Osiris, the firstborn. And already you can tell there's something different about him. He's regal, serene. You watch as he steps onto the land of his father Geb, his every movement slow and deliberate, like someone used to being watched. His skin is green, lush, vibrant, the colour of rebirth and Nile silt. He doesn't speak, not yet. But the earth itself seems to respond to his presence. Crops sprout, rivers hum, even the air sighs softer. Osiris is order, civilization, the idea that life can mean more than just surviving the desert. He's the first god to rule, not just exist. And that concept that a god could create law and structure bleeds into human life later. The first kings of Egypt would claim they were living images of Osiris. Pharaohs were mortal echoes of this calm, stern, green-skinned being. And with him comes Isis, his sister, his wife, his equal. Oh yes, buckle up. Egyptian myths are wild with divine pairings, but this one is legendary. Isis isn't just a goddess. She's the goddess. Magic incarnate. She steps into the world right behind Osiris, and the whole atmosphere shifts. You feel it tingling down your spine. The air smells like warm myrrh. She's radiant but grounded, eyes sharp enough to cut through lies. She's going to be important. Very important. Osiris and Isis begin shaping the world. Together they teach humans how to farm, how to worship, how to live in harmony with the floods and droughts. You can almost see it. The first temple taking shape from stone and sweat. Priests lifting offerings beneath Nut's star-spangled belly. There's a sense of peace, of hope, but it's fragile. You can feel it trembling beneath the surface, because like any good myth, peace doesn't last. and wouldn't you know it? The next child born during those extra moon days is Set. Now Set is a mood, and that mood is chaos with great hair. He bursts into the world screaming and stomping and laughing at things that aren't funny. His skin's the colour of dry blood, his hair like desert fire. And his head, well, it's hard to describe. Seriously, scholars still argue about it. Some say it's a donkey, others say aardvark or anteater, or straight up mystery animal. It's like the artists gave up halfway through and just said, we'll fix it in post. But the point is, he's different. He's wild. He doesn't bring crops or law, he brings storms, sand, jealousy. And yeah, the occasional necessary act of destruction. He's chaos, but not always evil, just uncomfortable. The kind of god who shows up uninvited and then somehow burns your couch and steals your girlfriend. Next up is Nephthys, the final sibling. She slips into the world like a shadow behind the others, quiet, dignified, often overlooked, but don't let that fool you. She's powerful, devoted, and absolutely the one who ends up picking up after everyone else. Think of her as the goth middle child with excellent instincts and a thankless job. So now you have all 5 children, Osiris and Isis, Set and Nephthys, with one sibling pairing as lovers, and the other, well, it's complicated. Depending on the myth, Nephthys is sometimes married to Set, and sometimes she just regrets knowing him. Either way, the family tension could cut through limestone. But back to Osiris. He becomes the first king of the world. You watch him sitting on a throne carved from lapis lazuli, a crook and flail in his hands. His crown glows faintly, white and red, symbolizing Upper and Lower Egypt. People kneel, offerings pile high. Music echoes. Under his rule, life flourishes. And Isis, she's right beside him, running things behind the scenes, teaching women how to spin, how to brew, how to chant the sacred words. She's magic and logic combined. Honestly, the world should have made her queen in her own right, but patriarchy, even divine, is a stubborn beast. Then there's Set, jealous, pacing in the shadows. His brother has everything, love, power, respect, and Set doesn't. He starts to fume, starts to plan, and soon, though not tonight, that plan will involve a coffin, a party, and a murder so dramatic it'll become the cornerstone of Egyptian mythology. But before that, the world exists in fragile balance. The divine family has taken to shape. Earth and sky are divided. Time is ticking. The Nile floods and recedes. Crops bloom, then die. And you, floating gently above it all, can see how it's coming together. Gods as metaphors, as emotions, as natural laws, turn hate, creation and destruction, all tangled up in relationships that make Thanksgiving dinner seem tame. Here's a quirky fact to tuck into your dreams. In one rare version of the myth, Set wasn't always the villain. He was actually Ra's personal bodyguard, defending the sunboat from a monstrous serpent every night, chaos protecting order. It's only later, when political tides turned in Egypt, that Set's image shifted to that of a villain. History, even divine, gets rewritten by whoever's holding the chisel, and the scholarly debate? Oh, it's juicy. Some academics argue that Osiris wasn't even originally a sky god at all, but an imported fertility figure from earlier Nubian beliefs. Others think he evolved from older agricultural myths, one of many dying and rising gods across ancient cultures. Was he real, symbolic, or a blend? Who knows? But to the Egyptians, he was everything: king, judge, father, corpse, and green-faced reminder that death isn't the end. So lie back now, let the stars of Nut cradle your dreams. Feel the soil of Geb beneath your back, rich and humming. You've just watched a divine family be born out of stolen time, and their story is just starting to spin out into love, betrayal, death, and rebirth. You're going to like where this is headed. The warmth of the early creation still clings to your skin as you drift through the golden age of Osiris's rule. The land is green, lush, Nile-fed and kissed by the sun, and under Osiris the world feels calm, almost predictable. He walks among mortals, teaches them to harvest wheat, to build in stone, to bury their dead with reverence. This isn't some distant, untouchable deity lounging on a throne in the clouds. No, Osiris is close, present. He sweats under the same sun as his people. He eats what they grow, and when he speaks, it's not thunder. It's a gentle ripple, like wind across papyrus reeds. He and Isis are inseparable now, ruling side by side like two halves of a single soul. The way they move around each other is so fluid, so attuned, you start to forget they were siblings first. The love is genuine, and it's strong. She matches his patience with cleverness, his ritual with instinct. He builds systems, she breathes magic into them. While Osiris is off spreading civilization from village to village, Isis handles the palace. She knows every priest's name, every midwife's trick, every line of every spell etched into the walls. If Osiris is the law, Isis is the reason people obey it. Not out of fear, but out of trust. But perfection attracts cracks. And the biggest crack of all is Set. Set has been watching, always watching, standing at the edges of the royal court like an ill omen in a designer robe. He sees the way the people adore Osiris. He hears the laughter in Isis's voice when Osiris returns from his travels, and all he feels is that gnawing itch, jealousy. In this myth, jealousy isn't a side character. It's a god with wild red hair, a strange animal head, and a plan. Set begins scheming, not just throwing a tantrum in the corner, real scheming, the kind that takes time, whispers, precision. He commissions a beautiful chest. A coffin, technically, but not one you'd find in a creepy tomb. This one is sleek, carved from cedarwood and inlaid with gold and precious stones. It's so beautiful, so perfectly crafted, that it makes even the gods pause. Then Set throws a party. You find yourself in the middle of the grandest celebration in ancient history. Gods and goddesses lounge on carved obsidian couches, sipping date wine and nibbling figs. Perfume thickens the air. Harp music drips from the shadows. Isis sits close to Osiris, her hand resting on his, as Set stands across the room, eyes glittering with a smile that doesn't reach his cheeks. And then he presents the chest. He acts casual, says it's just a game. Whoever fits perfectly inside this box, he announces, gets to keep it. The gods laugh. One by one they climb in, playfully trying to squeeze into it. But of course no one fits until Osiris steps forward. The box is exactly his size. He lays down inside, smiling at the absurdity of it all. Maybe a little wine blurred. Maybe just trusting his brother, as only a god raised in the early days of creation could. And then, slam, Set and his conspirators rush forward, seal the lid shut and nail it down. Before the other gods can react, they lift the chest and toss it into the Nile. The music dies. The perfume curdles. Isis screams, too late. Osiris is gone. You chase the chest downriver in a dreamlike glide, following as it floats through reeds, past crocodiles and fishermen who don't understand what just passed them. It drifts for days, weeks, till it finally lodges in the roots of a great tree near the city of Byblos. The tree grows around it, swallowing the box like a secret. And in this tree Osiris sleeps, not dead, not alive, caught in a divine pause. This moment is crucial. Osiris isn't just a murdered god now, he's something new, something no one has ever been before, the first to die. And death in Egyptian mythology isn't some ghastly horror movie finale. It's a transition, a door, and Osiris is about to walk through it. Meanwhile, Isis begins her search. You watch her shed her royal robes and don the tattered cloak of a wanderer. She walks from town to town asking animals and gods and humans if they've seen the chest. Her hair becomes tangled with dust. Her feet bleed. But her determination never fades. Isis isn't just a grieving widow. She's the blueprint for every mythological woman who goes to hell and back for love. Eventually, she reaches Byblos. She recognizes the tree. She knows what lies inside. Now the myth gets weird again. The tree, having grown around the coffin, has been cut down and turned into a pillar in the palace of the local king. Yes, really. So Isis becomes a nursemaid in that household, quietly biding her time until she reveals her identity and demands the chest. The moment is soft but fierce. She isn't begging, she's reclaiming. She takes the coffin back to Egypt, hides it deep in the marshes, and for a brief, fleeting moment she has Osiris again. But Set, because of course Set, finds it. This time he doesn't just lock the box, he opens it, rips Osiris's body into 14 pieces, scattering them across the land like cursed confetti. Each piece in a different location, each one sacred now, and then he vanishes into the red sands. You'd think this would be the end of it, but not for Isis. She begins again, searching, gathering, mourning. She finds 13 of the 14 pieces, sewing Osiris back together in hidden temples. For the missing part, his, let's say, masculine bit, she fashions a new one from gold and divine magic. And then, in a spell-laced union that defies physics and maybe good taste, she conceives a child. That child is Horus, but tonight, rest in the moment just before he arrives. Feel the world hold its breath. Osiris, now whole in death, becomes king of the underworld. His green skin fades to a deeper moonlit hue. He trades his earthly crown for one of justice and silence. He is no longer the ruler of the living, but of what lies beyond, the god who went into death and came out as its master. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some myths, the tears Isis shed while searching for Osiris became the very floodwaters of the Nile. Every year, when the river overflows its banks, Here's your quirky tidbit. In some myths, the tears Isis shed while searching for Osiris became the very floodwaters of the Nile. Every year, when the river overflows its banks, it's not just a seasonal event, it's a divine grief ritual. The earth weeps with her. Crops drink from her sorrow and life grows again. It's one of those moments where myth and nature blend so seamlessly you stop asking what's literal and what's symbolic. The ancient Egyptians didn't draw lines like we do. For them, metaphor was reality, and Isis, she was heartbreak turned into hope. Now shift your focus, feel the energy pull toward the horizon, into the harsh, dry winds of the desert. That's where Set roams now, but let's pause before we call him the villain. Because yes, he murdered his brother, chopped him into bits, and yeeted those bits across Egypt like some divine tantrum. But in myth, especially Egyptian myth, things aren't so clean-cut. Set doesn't represent evil, he represents chaos, the unpredictable, the storm, the rupture in the cycle, and chaos isn't always bad. It's just inconvenient, loud, necessary even. Take the desert, for instance. The Egyptians hated it. It was dry, dangerous, full of sandstorms and scorpions, but without the desert, there would be no Nile, no contrast, no green strip of life. Set is that contrast. He's the dry heat to Osiris's fertile flood, the red land against the black soil, and though the myths often cast him as the antagonist, he's also the protector of Ra's sunboat. Yeah, you heard that right. Every night, as the sun god Ra sails through the underworld, facing monsters, darkness, and that giant chaos serpent named Apep, Set stands at the prow of the boat, spear in hand, fending off doom, the god of chaos fighting chaos itself. It's poetic and a little ironic, like watching a tornado punch a thunderstorm. This duality, destructive brother, cosmic bodyguard, is what makes it so fascinating. He's unpredictable. You can't worship him exactly, not the way you'd worship Osiris or Isis, but you can't ignore him either. He's always there at the edge of things, the gust of hot wind that slams your door, the jackal tracks in the sand, the silence before something breaks. Set is also the only major Egyptian god whose animal form isn't based on anything real. His Set animal has a long, curved snout, square ears, and a forked tail, and to this day no one agrees what it is. Scholars have guessed everything from aardvark to greyhound to fennec fox to some extinct creature we'll never name. Or maybe, just maybe, the Set animal is symbolic, a representation of something unnatural, something that doesn't fit neatly into the world, just like Set himself. Now, remember Nephthys, the quiet one? She's still here, always in the background, always overlooked. But in many myths, she plays a vital role. Some say she helps Isis gather the body parts of Osiris. Others say she helps protect Horus, the son Isis is now carrying. In one version of the story, she even betrays Set, her husband or brother, depending on the source, because she knows right from wrong, and blood loyalty isn't everything. Nephthys is the goddess of mourning, of liminal spaces, of twilight and transition. She's the nurse who stays after everyone else has gone home. The hand that holds yours at the end of a long night. People don't build giant temples to her. They whisper her name during funerals. They feel her presence in moments when grief is so heavy it becomes sacred. Meanwhile, Isis is preparing, not just as a mother, but as a strategist, because she knows the story isn't over. Her son Horus is the heir to Osiris's throne, and one day he'll have to face Set. But Isis doesn't raise him in a palace. No, she hides with him in the marshes of the Nile Delta, far from the redlands of Set. The reeds rise high around them, curling into green cathedrals. The air is thick with frogs and dragonflies. And there, in that humid cradle, Horus grows. You can almost see him now, wide-eyed, falcon-headed, already dreaming of revenge. But that's for later. For now, he's a child, watched over not just by Isis and Nephthys, but by strange little gods you haven't met yet, tiny squat protectors like Bes, who growls at nightmares, and Tawereh, a hippo goddess who keeps evil from the nursery. The Egyptian pantheon has layers, and some of the most powerful figures aren't kings or warriors, but guardians of sleeping children. Here's a quirky fact to tuck under your pillow. Set was originally considered a hero in parts of Upper Egypt. In some towns he was celebrated as a brave warrior who protected the sun and fought off evil. Only later, as the cult of Osiris grew more popular, did Set's role shift into something darker. Myth isn't static, it evolves. Gods rise and fall not because their powers change, but because the people's stories change. It's mythology by democracy. And the debates, oh, they're juicy. Some Egyptologists argue that the Osiris-Set conflict isn't just a myth, it's political allegory. A battle between Upper and Lower Egypt, or between competing priesthoods. Others see it as a seasonal metaphor, set as the dry, chaotic season, killing off Osiris, the fertile flood. Still others think it is just classic sibling rivalry, divine addition. But here you are, in the eye of the storm. Osiris is gone but not gone. Isis is waiting, weaving spells in the dark. Nephthys watches from the shadows, always one step behind the spotlight. And Set, somewhere out there, is grinning beneath a blood-red sky, thinking the story's over. It isn't. You lie back in the reeds now, the stars blinking above, and feel the quiet weight of myth settling into your bones. Everything is still for a moment. The air is thick with potential. Something is coming, a showdown, a trial, a new generation ready to reclaim what was lost. But not tonight. Tonight, let your dreams drift with the Nile. Let Set's footsteps fade into the desert wind. Let the gods argue in silence while you rest in the calm between acts. Tomorrow the falcon opens his eyes. Morning breaks gently in the marshlands of the Nile Delta, and you're right there with it, wrapped in soft green reeds. Listening to the croak of frogs and the buzz of dragonflies. The air is thick, damp and warm, like a heavy quilt made of river breath. Somewhere nearby, water trickles between lotus roots, and the quiet is absolute, until you hear her, Nephthys. She's not calling your name exactly, but her voice carries across the water like smoke, low, tittle, or without drama. She's not like Isis, no radiant glow, no fanfare. She moves quietly in the background, but tonight we're pulling her into the foreground where she belongs. Nephthys has always been a little invisible. Even her name means Lady of the House, which sounds more like an honorific than an identity. But the house she rules over, that's not a domestic space, it's the temple. The threshold, the place where mortals and gods brush against each other, like shadows passing in moonlight. She's the divine receptionist of the afterlife, the one who keeps the candles lit while everyone else is off being dramatic. She's the sister of Isis, daughter of Geb and Nut, born on one of those extra days created by Thoth's cosmic calendar loophole. And yeah, she gets paired off with Set in some versions of the myth, but let's be honest, she's got zero chemistry with him. Like if she were texting, it would be all dry K responses and ghost emojis. Depending on which version you're reading, she either leaves him, cheats on him with Osiris, leading to a whole paternity scandal, or just quietly distances herself because, you know, he dismembered her brother. Still, Nephthys is loyal, not to Set, but to grief. That's her element. While Isis is all action and rescue missions, Nephthys sits beside the dying. She's the one you feel when the world pauses after someone takes their last breath. Not the panic, not the mourning, the pause, that strange still space where something sacred hovers. You're in that space now. In the myth, Nephthys plays a crucial role in the aftermath of Osiris's death. Alongside Isis, she helps gather the pieces of his body, whispering laments as she works. She sings dirges, songs of mourning so old, so deep they don't use words. They use weight, the kind of sound that makes your bones ache, even if you don't know why. Together, the sisters become symbols of divine mourning, guardians of the dead. On the walls of tombs and temples, they flank coffins, arms outstretched, protecting souls as they pass into the next realm. If Isis is the spell, Nephthys is the silence between the syllables. Both are necessary, neither can exist alone. Now here's your quirky bedtime fact. Nephthys was believed to have wings like a great protective bird. In funerary art, she's shown with her arms out, winged and wide, like she's ready to catch you if you fall. She and Isis both were said to turn into kites, not the toy but the bird, circling over Osiris's body, wailing in shrill cries that echoed through the afterlife. The Egyptians believed those sounds, real kites crying in the distance, were literal expressions of grief. Every bird was a hymn, and it's not just myth. In the embalming rituals of ancient Egypt, priestesses would embody Isis and Nephthys, taking on their roles physically. They'd stand at the head and foot of the corpse, chant specific laments, and perform gestures meant to reenact the mourning of the gods. These weren't just performances, they were sacred reenactments. Every funeral was a tiny piece of divine theatre, with Nephthys backstage making sure it all ran smoothly. But here's where things get murky, because we don't really know who worshipped Nephthys the most. She didn't have giant cult centres like Isis or Ra. Instead, her presence was scattered, embedded in rituals, appearing in spells and tomb inscriptions. Scholars still debate whether she had her own temples, or whether she was always secondary, always standing beside someone else's altar. Some argue she's a symbol of forgotten women, those who serve but are never seen. Others see her as a necessary counterpart to Isis, balancing action with contemplation, magic with mourning. Still others suggest Nephthys wasn't originally part of the same myth cycle at all, but was absorbed later as the Osiris story expanded. Mythology, like memory, edits itself over time, and yet despite her mysterious origins, Nephthys has staying power. She's the soft hum of a candlelit room. The breath before a name is spoken at a eulogy, the chill that rises on your neck when you realise someone is gone, and yet somehow still here. Back in the marshes, she sits quietly by the water, watching Isis cradle the falcon-headed infant Horus. Her role now is protector, not just of the baby, but of the plan. She guards the perimeter while Isis sleeps, keeps the shadows from getting too close. In the deep, twisted myths, it's even suggested that she's the one who calls Thoth when the child is poisoned. Yeah, we'll get there. And asks the god of knowledge to intervene. Nephthys doesn't make loud moves, but she makes the ones that matter. And for you, lying here now, she is the presence that helps you drift, not into sleep, but into that threshold between wakefulness and dream, the space where the past gets soft around the edges, and everything feels half-remembered and sacred. So take a moment to thank her. Thank the quiet goddesses, the ones who don't have temples named after them, the ones who don't get movies or marble statues or Instagram shrines, the ones who show up not for their power, but for you, when you're hurting, when you're waiting, when no one else knows what to say. She's there, and she's not going anywhere. The reed beds have grown quiet now. Even the frogs seem to know that something's shifted, that the baby, the one tucked into the crook of Isis's arm, feather-soft and falcon-eyed, isn't just a god. He's a symbol, a reckoning, a living question mark born from tragedy and stitched together resurrection. This is Horus, child of Osiris and Isis, and technically conceived after his father was very much dead. Don't think too hard about the logistics. It's mythology. The rules are more like suggestions. Right now, he's still small. His feathers haven't quite come in, his wings tucked under as he naps on a makeshift blanket of papyrus leaves. But already, the myths swirl around him. Isis holds him close, always watching. Nephthys stands guard nearby. Sometimes Thoth drops in, offering cryptic riddles or healing spells, and into the background the air thickens with the knowledge that Set is still out there, and that one day this child will have to face him. But Horus isn't raised in a palace. No servants, no fanfare. Isis keeps him hidden in the delta marshes, wrapped in magic and mud, far from Set's reach. These waters are dense with life and danger. Every day is a quiet war against scorpions, fever and betrayal. You can feel it in the air, thick and buzzing like a storm before it breaks. Even gods have to learn to survive. In one myth, while Isis is out gathering herbs or chasing some cryptic vision, Horus is left alone and bitten by a venomous snake. The marsh falls silent. Time freezes. The baby god's tiny chest barely moves. Isis returns to find him limp and cold, and here, the myth becomes unbearable. She cradles him, sobbing not as a goddess, but as a mother. You can feel her panic as she screams into the wind, calling out for help, for justice, for someone, anyone, to intervene. And someone does. Thoth arrives. The ibis-headed god of wisdom, moonlight, and divine speech appears like a cool breeze on a fevered night. He kneels beside Isis and speaks a spell, not just words, but syllables so old they predate language itself. His voice coils through the air like smoke, each phrase undoing the venom, drawing out death the way the tide pulls away from the shore. And Horus breathes again. This story isn't just about a near-death experience, it's a template. In ancient Egypt, mothers would recite the exact spell Thoth used to protect their own children. It was copied on papyrus scrolls, carved into amulets, whispered over cribs. The gods weren't distant ideas, they were emergency contacts, first responders. Now, Horus grows. Slowly, steadily, he shifts from quiet infant to awkward divine teen. The falcon features begin to take shape. The sharp beak, the cutting gaze, the aura of flight. He starts training in the arts of war, not because he wants to fight, but because he has to. Set still sits on the throne that rightfully belongs to Osiris. The world, while outwardly functional, has a wound in its centre. And Horus? He's the bandage, or the blade. Maybe both. But growing up with that kind of prophecy hanging over you, it's not peaceful. Horus is angry, conflicted. He wants vengeance, but he's also a child of two loving, nurturing deities. He wants justice, but the path there is paved with violence. He wants his throne, but he doesn't fully know what it means to rule. You can almost see him sparring in the marsh fog, hurling spears made of light into the air, then collapsing from exhaustion. Isis watches, always careful not to interfere too much. She knows that power handed down without effort is just set in disguise. Horus must earn his victory. He must become the kind of god that can lead a kingdom, not just avenge one. Here's your quirky fact. In some versions of the myth, Horus actually loses an eye during his battles with Set. Not temporarily, he really loses it. Set gouges it out in a vicious fight, and the eye becomes something more than just a body part. It transforms into a symbol, the Eye of Horus, a divine amulet of protection and restoration. Later, the eye is magically healed by Thoth and returned to Horus, not just as a replacement, but as a gift. This one myth, one fight, gave birth to one of the most powerful symbols in all of Egyptian history. People wore the Eye of Horus on necklaces, painted it on boats, even buried it with their dead. It was said to keep away illness, evil, and bad luck. If you've ever seen that stylized eye with the swirl beneath it, congrats, you've already met Horus. And here's the scholarly debate to noodle over as you drift. Some Egyptologists think that Horus might have been two different gods originally. One was an elder sky god, the other a younger avenger of Osiris. Over time, the two got blended together into the version we know now, a single deity with layers of personality. This explains why Horus sometimes shows up as a child, sometimes as a king, and sometimes as a full-grown warrior casually yeeting spears at chaos monsters. But back in the marsh, he's still growing. The reeds sway like old friends, the wind carries distant echoes of war drums, Isis sharpens her cells while Nephthys patrols the shadows, and Horus dreams, not of revenge, but of balance. Somewhere deep in his half-divine heart, he knows this isn't just about punishing Set, it's about restoring the mat, the harmony his father once embodied. For now, though, let him sleep, let the falcon's eyes rest, let the air stay still. Because once he spreads his wings, the entire cosmos is going to shift. And you'll be right there when it happens. You wake to the sound of wings, not flapping, not loud, just the whisper of feathers slicing through early morning mist. Horus is flying. Finally. Not in a symbolic the child is growing kind of way. No, he's literally soaring. His falcon form cuts through the dawn sky like a thrown blade, sleek and sodden, the air parting for him as though it remembers who he is, or more importantly, who he's going to be. Below, the Nile sparkles. Villagers in tiny reed boats look up, squinting into the light, unaware that the young god above them is the reason the sun feels just a little warmer today. Horus isn't here to rule, yet. He's still testing his wings, circling the sky, learning how the world looks when you rise above it. From up here, Set's reign seems distant, like a storm cloud that hasn't broken yet. But Horus can feel it building. Now, it's time to talk about the sun. In Egyptian mythology, the sun isn't just a flaming ball of gas doing its thing. It's a being, a god. His name is Ra, and he's been around since nearly the beginning. Depending on the version of the myth you follow, he's the same as Atum, or maybe he's Atum's evolved form, or Atum just in his daytime job. The Egyptian pantheon's less family tree and more family spaghetti. Anyway, Ra is the sun. Every day he sails across the sky in a celestial boat, called the Manjet or solar bark, bringing light and life to the world. And every night he descends into the underworld, Duat, where things get a little dicey, because lurking in the deep shadows of the Duat is a creature so old, so terrifying that even the gods fear it. Its name is Apep, sometimes Apophis if you want the Greek remix, and it is a giant chaos serpent. No personality, no political agenda, just a snake the size of a freight train who wants one thing, to swallow the sun and end the world. You feel that chill, don't you? That primal fear? That's exactly what Apep represents. Fear with no form, no logic, no reason. Just hunger. And every night as Ra's sun bark drifts through the darkness, Apep attacks. Sometimes he coils himself around the boat trying to drag it down into the abyss. Sometimes he opens his jaws wide enough to devour the stars themselves. This isn't just a story about celestial navigation. It's an eternal war between light and oblivion. Now here's where things get interesting. Set, yes, that Set joins the crew. Yep, the god who murdered his brother, threw Egypt into chaos, and ruined pretty much everyone's day, is now standing aboard the sunboat, spear in hand, defending the light. See? Egyptian mythology is never black and white. Set's role as Ra's bodyguard is one of the great contradictions in the mythos. Despite being the embodiment of chaos, he's also the one strong enough to fight Apep head-on. Picture it, Set, wild-haired and furious, standing at the bow like a one-god Navy SEAL, stabbing at the serpent while Ra navigates and the stars hold their breath. In one version of the myth, Apep swallows the entire sunboat. Darkness falls over the world, the sun disappears, and for a moment you feel what true chaos feels like. Not noise, but silence. Endless, cold silence. Then Set fights his way out of the serpent's belly, dragging the bark back into the sky like a lifeguard hauling a drowned swimmer from the depths. Dawn breaks, Ra rises. The world sighs in relief, and that happens every single night. The Egyptians weren't playing around when it came to cosmology. Every sunrise was a miracle, every sunset a warning. When you woke up in the morning, it meant that Ra had survived another trip through the underworld. And Set, the problematic cousin of the gods, had done his job again. Here's your quirky fact for the night. There were rituals performed in temples at dawn specifically to help Ra defeat Apep. Priests would chant spells, burn incense, and even stab snake effigies to symbolically aid the fight. Imagine a bunch of ancient clergymen gathered around a clay snake shouting, "Not today, Apophis!" Viz is equal parts terrifying and oddly charming. And the debate? Oh, it's juicy. Some scholars argue that Set's role on the sunboat was added later, sort of a redemption arc for a god who'd gotten a bad rap. Others think it was always there, proof that the Egyptian theology embraced contradiction. Set could be both destroyer and defender, murderer and protector, because real life is messy, and mythology just reflects that in more dramatic lighting. Horus, meanwhile, watches all this from above. He sees the sun rise again and again, thanks in part to the same uncle who tore his father apart. Imagine the complexity of that. Imagine growing up knowing that your sworn enemy is also the reason the sun hasn't been eaten by a snake. That's a therapy bill wrapped in feathers and gold. In later myths, Horus actually becomes fused with Ra, forming the composite deity Ra Horakti, Ra who is Horus of the two horizons. In this form he represents the sun rising and setting, east and west, beginning and end. It's mythic shorthand for maturity, for stepping into your parents' role and making it your own. Horus isn't just the child of Osiris anymore, he's stepping into something larger. But not yet. For now, he watches. You feel him hovering above you now, circling slowly in the cool morning sky. He's learning, calculating, preparing. And far below, Set stands blood-spattered on the prow of the sunboat, growling at the stars, waiting for Apep's next move. And you? You're floating in the space between two gods. One born from revenge, the other from resilience. One fights for light, the other is it. Both tangled in an eternal cycle that has nothing to do with good or evil, and everything to do with balance. So close your eyes now. Let the sun rise behind your eyelids. Let. Set keep the monsters away just a little longer. Let Horus ride the wind. Tomorrow the war begins. Night falls like a velvet curtain across the Nile, and the stars begin their slow twinkle overhead, tiny pinpricks glowing in Nut's stretched, arched body. The world quiets, but the cosmos does not sleep. Somewhere far below in the underworld's deepest corridors, Ra is boarding his sunboat again, and this time you're coming with him. It's colder than you expect, not icy, but dense, like a cave with no air circulation. The Duat, the Egyptian underworld, isn't a burning hell or some shadowy void, it's a land. A real winding, labyrinthine expanse that the sun must travel through every single night. And Ra, the sun god, doesn't just sit at the helm whistling a tune. No, he's here to fight, to shine, to survive. The boat slides across a black river. The waters bubble slightly, not with heat, but with magic, the kind that tastes like metal and forgotten prayers. The boat creaks under the weight of eternity. On deck are other gods, each armed with blades, spears, and spells older than sand. Among them, always watching, is Set. Tonight, Apep is restless. The snake god of chaos doesn't wear a crown. He doesn't speak. He hates all order, language, light, time, form. If Ra is a flame, Apep is the void that wants to snuff it out. He's so large that when he coils in the darkness, it feels like space itself is shrinking. And when he strikes, he doesn't lunge, he unfolds. Suddenly, the river swells, the boat lurches. You grip the railing as something enormous breaches the surface beside you, glistening like oil and shadows. Apep. Set moves instantly. He doesn't wait for a command. He leaps onto the prow, spear crackling with divine fire. He screams, not in fear but in rage, and drives his blade into Apep's endless body. The serpent writhes, stars flicker. The boat tips hard to one side, but the gods hold fast. The battle is brutal and silent, no music. No thunder, just the sound of teeth grinding, of scales cracking, of chaos meeting its match. Eventually the snake recoils, wounded but not dead. Always defeated, never destroyed. Ra, calm as ever, continues on. Light begins to creep in, just a sliver heralding dawn. This scene plays out every night. That's Egyptian cosmology for you. Everything isn't just myth, it's routine. The sun's journey isn't guaranteed. Every sunrise is a victory, a reset button. And Apep? He's not an end-of-level boss. He's a cosmic constant. You don't defeat him once, you defeat him forever. Here's a strange but lovely fact. In many temple rituals, priests would enact this exact battle. Every night, they'd chant anti-Apep spells and sometimes even stomp on snake drawings carved into the temple floor. That's right, stomp, literal, sacred stomping. Imagine being a priest in full leopard skin robes, pacing around a candlelit sanctuary, stepping on stone snakes while whispering curses. That's the job description. And Apep wasn't even worshipped. Unlike Set, who had followers and temples at one point, Apep was too dangerous to even name. In fact, some spells refer to him as the enemy, or the one who is not. Apep wasn't just feared, he was erased. The Egyptians understood that words had power. Saying his name might give him strength, so they unnamed him. They countered his chaos with silence, but not all scholars agree on Apep's origin. Some believe he evolved from earlier snake deities, or that he was a symbolic manifestation of natural disasters, floods, droughts, solar eclipses. Others argue he represents the necessary flip side to Ra's light. Without darkness, after all, there's no dawn. And Ra, he keeps going. After the battle, he passes through the various gates of the underworld, each guarded by strange beings. Some part crocodile, some part human, others too bizarre to even categorize. You pass through flaming corridors, cross bridges over blood-colored lakes, navigate mazes of glass and bone. Each hour of night is a challenge, a transformation. In one chamber, Ra meets Osiris, who rules over the land of the dead with a quiet, unblinking calm. This isn't the broken god you remember from earlier. No, Osiris here is whole, regal, even peaceful. He wears white linen, his skin tinted green like new life. His throne is flanked by the four sons of Horus, and his eyes don't blink. They see past death, through time. When Ra and Osiris meet, they don't speak. They merge, just for a moment. This is the sacred hour of transformation, when the sun and the afterlife align. Ra borrows Osiris' strength, and Osiris is reminded of the light that once touched his face. And in that quiet fusion, the spark of sunrise is born. Back on the boat, Set is panting, his spear is cracked, but his eyes are wild with the thrill of surviving yet again. This is the version of him few talk about, the one who, in spite of everything, fights for light, for order, for Ra, and above it all, in the waking world, Horus opens his eyes. The child in the marsh has grown. His body now carries the weight of two realms, sky and kingship. The time has come. He must face Set, not on the sunboat, but in court. Yes, court. You might have expected a big battlefield showdown, swords and lightning and ancient one-on-one combat. But no, this is Egypt. The gods are dramatic, sure, but they're also bureaucratic. Soon Horus and Set will stand trial before the Ennead, the divine tribunal of gods, to determine who rightfully owns the throne of Egypt. Spoiler, it will not be straightforward. But for now, feel the boat glide into the final hour of night. The stars fade slowly, the sky turns from black to grey. Ra steps forward, renewed. Apep sinks back into his pit, coiling for tomorrow. And you stretch out across a divine deck, carried by ancient light, protected by the chaos you didn't expect to trust. Dawn is close now. The journey is almost complete. Let it rise. The sun crests over the horizon like an old friend, tired, triumphant, and right on schedule. You stretch in the warmth of it, feeling the last traces of the duat slip from your skin like river mist. Above, Nut shimmers with the fading stars, bending backward to birth the sun yet again. It's comforting, in a cosmic déjà vu sort of way, but peace, as always, is short-lived. Because while Ra sails steadily through the sky and Osiris sits silent on his throne in the underworld, a lawsuit is brewing in the realm of the living. Welcome to the celestial courtroom. No joke, this next stretch of mythology is less sword fight and more legal drama, complete with petty insults, surprise witnesses, and divine bureaucracy. It's the trial of the millennium, Horus versus Set and the prize, the throne of Egypt. You're seated somewhere in the back of the gallery. The walls are made of limestone carved with prayers and scenes of divine birth. Incense coils lazily toward the high ceiling. Gods and goddesses fill the chamber in long rows, each more elaborately dressed than the last. Some have animal heads, some wear towering crowns, and others sip from goblets with unnerving calm. At the centre sits the Ennead, the 9 great deities who will decide the case. Presiding over them is Ra himself, in full regalia, his sun disk blazing, his face unreadable. Beside him are Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Isis, Nephthys, and a few lesser gods you've only seen on temple walls. These aren't neutral judges, mind you. They all have opinions, biases, grudges. This is God court, not law and order. Horus steps forward. He's no longer the falcon boy from the marsh. He's tall, sharp, composed, with a gaze like horizon fire. He claims what is frankly his, the right to rule as Osiris' son, as the rightful heir. He's calm, measured, but you can feel the tension in his shoulders. Then there's Set, striding into the room like he owns it. He's taller than everyone, broader too, with red skin and that unidentifiable animal snout. His voice is smooth, too smooth. He smiles like a man who's been acquitted before. His argument? That he should rule because he's stronger, older, and better suited to fend off Egypt's enemies. And the gods hesitate. What follows is 80 years, yes, 80 of back and forth. Testimonies, evidence, even contests of strength and endurance. Horus and Set are ordered to race boats made entirely of stone because of course they are. Horus, clever as ever, cheats. He builds his from wood and paints it to look like stone. Set's boat sinks immediately. The gods laugh, but no verdict is reached. Then come the character trials. In one memorable episode, Set invites Horus to a feast and gets him drunk. Classic Set move. Then in the oldest recorded example of divine sexual harassment, Set tries to dominate Horus in the middle of the night. Horus, prepared, catches Set's essence and presents it in court like it's Exhibit A. The trial pauses for an awkwardly long time. In retaliation, Horus spreads his own seed on Set's favourite lettuce, yes, lettuce, and Set eats it. Later, during a hearing, the gods call upon Set's own bodily fluids to speak as witnesses, and in one of mythology's weirdest flexes, They do. You're not imagining this. That's an actual part of the myth. But even after all this, Ra still hesitates to give Horus the throne. Set is strong, Set fights Apep, Set is useful. The idea of giving the kingdom to a younger, less proven god feels risky. Enter Isis, though she's had enough. She transforms herself into a beautiful young woman, because no myth ever resists that trope, and sits by a river where Set happens to be walking. She strikes up a conversation, plays innocent. She tells him a story about a widow whose son was denied his inheritance by a cruel relative. Set, full of righteous indignation, proclaims, "That's unjust. The son should inherit what is his." Boom! Isis transforms back into herself, points a divine finger in his face and says, "Gotcha." The court gasps. Set stammers. But somehow, even this isn't enough. Ra still wavers. The gods bicker, some supporting Horus, others insisting Set's power is more valuable. The stalemate stretches into decades. The sky spins. Egypt waits. Then in an unexpected twist, Ra retreats from the court altogether and goes off to ride the sky, leaving the Ennead to stew in their indecision. Horus, exhausted and increasingly unhinged, rips off Set's testicles in a brawl. Set, not to be outdone, gouges out Horus's eye, and yet the trial continues. Here's your quirky fact. The eye of Horus now missing isn't just a cool symbol. In this part of the myth, it becomes a character. It literally wanders off on its own, travels the world, gets into arguments with other deities, and eventually returns, healed by Thoth. When Horus gets it back, it becomes a symbol of restoration, of healing, and of justice finally taking root. And at long last, the gods rule in Horus's favour. They restore his eye, crown him king of Egypt, and exile Set to the desert, where he'll keep doing what he does best: chaos management, monster fighting, and making people deeply uncomfortable. The throne passes to Horus, and you're here for the moment it happens. The crown gleams on his head. The falcon-headed god stands before the Ennead, silent and radiant. Isis and Nephthys flank him. Ra nods from the sky, and below, in every village along the Nile, farmers look up to see the falcon circling above. And they know balance has been restored. Here's the scholarly debate to drift off with. Was this myth political propaganda? Some historians think so. They argue it reflects a real ancient power struggle between Upper and Lower Egypt. Others believe it was a theological metaphor for succession, how divine kingship passes from one generation to the next. Or maybe it's just a story, a messy, ridiculous, brilliant story. And now, night falls again. The duat opens once more. Ra prepares to descend, and Set, yes, that Set, tightens his grip on his spear, ready to face Apep again. But up here, in the realm of the living, Horus rules. Let that settle into your chest like warm sand. Justice didn't come easily. It never does. But it came. And now, you can rest. You wake up to something you can't quite name, an unfamiliar stillness, like the hush that comes right after a storm. No wind, no birdsong, not even the lazy buzz of insects. Just that feeling, soft but deep, that something has changed. And overhead, for the first time in what feels like forever, Horus flies not as a son seeking justice, but as a king. His wingspan casts long shadows across the desert and farmland alike, and the people look up, blinking into the light, not in fear, but in recognition. Horus isn't just Osiris' son anymore. He's not just the boy raised in reeds. He's now the living pharaoh, a god in human form, ruling from the throne of Egypt with his eye restored and his purpose sharpened. But here's something strange. Even now, after trials and battles and decades of divine bickering, Horus doesn't punish Set with death. He exiles him, yes, but leaves him alive. Why? Because the world still needs chaos. Which brings us to tonight's goddess, Mayhat. Her name probably sounds familiar, especially if you've ever fallen down an ancient Egypt rabbit hole. But she's not flashy. She's not riding solar boats or flinging lightning bolts. In fact, Mayhat barely speaks. She doesn't need to. She's the reason all the other gods can speak at all. Mayhat is the goddess of truth, justice, order, and cosmic balance. Not in the legalistic way, like courtrooms and punishments, although, yeah, she helps with that too, but in the deep way. The kind of balance that keeps the sun rising, the Nile flowing, and the stars moving across the sky like a perfectly rehearsed dance. She doesn't command armies. She doesn't even carry a weapon. Her symbol is a single ostrich feather, tucked into her headdress, light as air, and loaded with meaning. You see it again and again, carved into temple walls, painted in tombs, etched into amulets worn by the living and the dead. Because when someone dies in ancient Egyptian belief, they don't just wander into the afterlife. Oh no, they're judged. And Ma'at is at the centre of that process. Picture this: a grand hall in the underworld, where a soul, let's say yours, stands before Osiris and the divine tribunal, Anubis. The jackal-headed god of embalming and the dead gently takes your heart, which in Egyptian belief holds your soul, memory, and morality. Not the brain, by the way. They considered that just filler. Your heart is then placed on a scale, and on the other side of that scale, Ma'at's feather. If your heart is lighter than the feather, congratulations, you get to continue on to the field of reeds, the peaceful paradise where the good live eternally, farming, fishing, and hanging out with their ancestors. But if your heart is heavier, if you've lived a life of cruelty, lies, imbalance, then something a little less cozy happens. Waiting beneath the scales is Amit, the devourer of the dead, a monstrous hybrid of crocodile, lion, and hippo. She doesn't growl, she doesn't roar, she just waits, jaws slightly open, and if your heart fails the test, she eats it. No second chances, no appeals. You're gone, not punished, not tortured, just erased, forgotten. An ancient version of the digital delete key. Click. Gone. And the terrifying thing, the gods don't interfere. Not even Isis, not even Osiris, because Ma'at isn't optional. She's the law beneath all laws. She predates the gods, or at least stands among the oldest. In some myths, even Ra sails with Ma'at by his side every day, to prove he's maintaining comforts in the universe. Even the sun has to answer to her. That's how serious she is. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Pharaohs wore Ma'at, not just symbolically, literally. They had her feather carved into their thrones, painted into their tombs, and sometimes even wore necklaces of Ma'at charms to show they ruled in her name. Doing Ma'at was an actual phrase in ancient Egyptian culture. It meant speaking truth, living justly, keeping the world in harmony. Imagine a culture where being out of sync with the universe wasn't just impolite, it was cosmic sabotage. And here's the open debate that keeps Egyptologists up at night. Was Ma'at a person, or just a principle? Some scholars think Ma'at was never really a separate goddess, but simply a personification of universal truth. Others argue she had an entire cult, temples, and followers who prayed to her just like Isis or Ra. The problem is, ancient texts don't always distinguish clearly between gods and concepts. Ma'at might be a being, or she might be the force that lets being happen at all. Heavy stuff for a bedtime story, huh? But let's bring it back down. Picture Ma'at walking through the court of the gods. No fanfare, no trumpets, just quiet nods as she passes. Even Set doesn't challenge her. Even Ra, flaming and ancient, turns his head when she speaks. She's not dramatic, she's just right. And it's Ma'at who finally justifies Horus's reign. After all the fighting, the trickery, the eye gouging, and the lettuce-based drama, she's the one who says, "This is the way." Not because Horus is strongest, not because he's Osiris' son, but because his kingship restores balance. And that's all she's ever wanted. Now close your eyes and imagine the feather. Not floating, not falling, just hovering in stillness. The world spinning gently around it, perfectly counterweighted. That's Ma'at. That's the dream of order in a universe that leans toward chaos. Tomorrow we'll return to the land of the living. There are still gods you haven't met. Ones who govern magic, who guard tombs, who drink too much beer and accidentally end humanity for an afternoon. But for now, rest in the balance. Let your heart quiet. Let your breath slow. The feather is watching. The air grows cooler now, touched with something dry and ancient, like the scent of linen soaked in incense and left for centuries in the shadow of a tomb wall. You're walking somewhere quiet, underground maybe, or in a realm parallel to the one you know. The world has shifted again. You feel it in your chest like the weight of forgotten memories settling in. Tonight you're not here for the kings or the sky gods or the snake-fighting bodyguards of the sun. You're here for the quiet one, the one who doesn't shout but waits, the one who doesn't stand in the spotlight but under the crescent of the moon. You're here for Anubis. He appears slowly, as if rising from shadow itself, jackal-headed, sleek, silent. His eyes glint like polished obsidian, not glowing but reflecting everything. His fur is jet black, darker than the night around him, yet never threatening. He doesn't approach with menace. He doesn't need to. Anubis doesn't demand your fear. He already knows it. The jackal god isn't the god of death exactly, that's more Osiris's territory now, but Anubis is the transition, the guide, the one who takes your hand when your heart stops and leads you down a corridor you've never walked before. He doesn't rule the dead, he protects them, and more than that, he prepares them. You're standing now in an embalming tent tucked behind a temple wall. The linen flaps ripple in the wind. Inside, the air smells sharp and bitter. Resin, myrrh, natron, a mix that clings to your nostrils and refuses to be forgotten. A body lies on a low stone table, someone important, but unnamed. The soul has already moved on. What remains is being readied for the journey. And Anubis is already at work. He doesn't speak. He moves with impossible precision, hands never hesitating. This is sacred labour, the art of preservation, the holy science of not letting time win. He wraps each limb with linen, seals the mouth with a charm, places amulets over the heart. Every gesture has meaning. Every fold is a prayer. In fact, in Egyptian funerary rituals, the chief embalmer would literally dress as Anubis, wearing a jackal mask during the process. To wrap the dead was to channel the divine. You weren't just dealing with a body, you were building a vessel for eternity, and Anubis didn't stop at mummification. He accompanied the soul after death, walking them to the Hall of Judgment, standing by as the heart was weighed against Ma'at's feather. He didn't speak in your defense, but he didn't abandon you either. He stayed until the end, even if it didn't go your way. Now here's your quirky fact for the night. Jackals were often seen hovering around burial grounds in ancient Egypt, not because they were divine at first, but because they were scavengers, real-world animals that sniffed out the dead. The Egyptians, in response, turned fear into worship. They didn't exterminate the jackals, they gave them a god. That's the kind of elegant, slightly spooky brilliance Egyptian theology does best. Elevate what haunts you. Over time, Anubis evolved. In the Old Kingdom, he was the top god of the dead, long before Osiris took over that gig. He was the patron of tombs, the inventor of embalming, the reason mummies were mummified. But when the Osiris myth grew in popularity, Anubis graciously stepped aside, becoming more of a guide and protector, less of a ruler. He didn't seem to mind. That wasn't his purpose. Anubis isn't about crowns or thrones. He's about dignity, decency, making sure the dead are remembered properly and prepared with care. But he's not alone in his work. In many tomb paintings, you'll see him walking beside Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods. Thoth keeps the records. He writes down the results of the judgment, the names of the dead, the spells that protect them. If Anubis is the mortician, Thoth is the notary. Together they escort you into the afterlife, one checking your soul, the other double-checking the paperwork. There's something strangely comforting about it. Death, as terrifying as it can be, is approached here with calm professionalism. No fire, no chaos, just two ancient beings doing their jobs so you can find your way home. And that's where the scholarly debates begin to flare. Some argue that Anubis wasn't always a jackal. There are theories he might have originally been canine adjacent, something more like a wild desert dog, even possibly a hybrid of real and imaginary animals. His name Inpu means to decay or royal child, which kind of sums him up, born of both rot and reverence. Others argue that Anubis is older than Osiris, older than Ma'at, maybe even older than Ra himself, that he came from a pre-dynastic religion that saw the jackal as something not feared but respected, a creature who knew how to navigate the edge between the living and the dead. Still, others think he was invented as a symbolic figure to explain the embalming process, turned divine over time. But myth doesn't need a solid origin. It just needs to mean something. And Anubis still does. Even today his image shows up on tattoos, statues, t-shirts, even in video games. Forever calm, forever silent, still holding the same expression. I'll walk with you, but I won't hold your hand unless you are. So now you stand at the entrance to a tomb. The air is dry but not stale. A soft breeze rustles the edge of the linen curtain. Anubis stands beside you, not speaking, not urging. He simply waits. And you understand in that quiet that death wasn't the end for the ancient Egyptians. It was the next leg of a journey, and Anubis was the one who made sure you didn't walk it alone. Let that settle into your bones. The idea that even in endings there is care. That even after everything else has stopped, someone is still there to make sure it's done right. The jackal watches, the feather waits, and the gods remember. There's a different kind of silence now, Not the hush of death, but the velvet stillness of a lazy afternoon. The kind where the sun presses down like a warm, drowsy hand, and time feels slow enough to taste. You're not in a tomb anymore. You're in a sun-drenched courtyard curled up beside a pillar that smells faintly of lotus and old stone. Cats nap in the shade. Incense drifts by in lazy curls. And sitting there, perched on the edge of a limestone wall, with one leg tucked under her and a subtle smirk on her lips, is Bastet. Yeah, the cat goddess. You knew she was coming, and not just a cat. Bastet is the cat, the divine feline who can make you feel adored and judged at the same time. She's purring one second, clawing through your enemies the next. Egyptian mythology has plenty of gods who rule the sky, the underworld, the sun, the moon. But Bastet, she rules the vibe. She's often shown as a woman with the head of a domestic cat, usually black or spotted, sometimes adorned with earrings or an ankh. In earlier centuries, though, Bastet didn't look like a sweet tabby lounging in a sunbeam. She was full-on lioness, wild, untamable, the roaring embodiment of the desert's ferocity. It wasn't until the Middle Kingdom that she softened into the more familiar cat form. Basically, she evolved from destroyer of nations to house cat with divine authority. But don't let the purring fool you. That cuddly exterior hides ancient fire. At her core, Bastet is a protector. Of homes, of women, of children, of anyone who dares to nap unguarded. She wards off plague and evil spirits, prowls the night in silence, and keeps demons from slipping through the cracks of the world. The Egyptians believed cats were sacred partly because of her, because every feline was a living echo of the goddess herself. And if you've ever had a cat stare into the void and hiss at something invisible in the corner, well, Bastet taught them that. In homes, she was adored. People kept statues of her for protection. Her image was stamped into amulets, carved into bedposts, painted on the walls. Her followers didn't just worship her, they loved her. And that love was returned, unless you were a mouse. Now here's where things get especially cozy. The ancient city of Bubastis, located in the Nile Delta, was her cult centre. Picture it, a sprawling temple surrounded by water, with columns painted in vivid reds and golds, all devoted to one being, Bastet. Every year they threw a festival in her honour, and by ancient standards it was wild. According to Greek historians, who absolutely had opinions about Egyptian rituals, the festival of Bastet was something between Mardi Gras and a full moon rave. Thousands of Egyptians would sail up the Nile in huge processions, drinking wine, playing music, dancing like the gods were watching, and they were. Everyone wore their best clothes, sang to the beat of sistrums, those metal rattle instruments Bastet loved, and celebrated life under the protection of their favourite goddess. It wasn't just revelry, though. It was release. Bastet's festival was a time to shake off fear, illness, anxiety, to let loose the tension of daily life in a world that was constantly negotiating between order and chaos. She was the reminder that joy could be sacred, that laughter had power. Here's your quirky bedtime fact. Egyptians mummified cats by the thousands in Bastet's honour, not just as offerings, but as actual companions in the afterlife. Archaeologists have found entire cat cemeteries, tiny sarcophagi beautifully preserved, complete with prayers and engraved dedications. Some were pets, some were temple cats, some were bred specifically for sacrifice, which, let's be honest, is less heartwarming, but still incredibly telling about how much Bastet was revered. And like everything in Egyptian myth, Bastet has a shadow side. She's often paired, deliberately contrasted, with another goddess, Sekhmet. While Bastet represents the domestic, soft, protective energy of feline divinity, Sekhmet is the raw, wild, wrathful lioness, the destroyer, the fire. The mythologies blur, sometimes saying they're sisters, sometimes two faces of the same being. In some stories, when Sekhmet goes on a rampage too terrible to control, Ra transforms her into Bastet to calm her down, from bloodlust to belly rubs, just like that. Which brings us to a bigger scholarly debate. Are Bastet and Sekhmet truly separate goddesses, or just two aspects of the same one? Some argue they split as Egyptian society changed, urbanization, politics, the growth of the priesthood, shifting emphasis from brute strength to household stability. Others believe they always coexisted, representing the two essential sides of protection, violence and comfort. You get both, or you get neither. But tonight Bastet is in her gentler mood. She stretches lazily, tail flicking, eyes half-lidded as she watches a scarab beetle roll by. You get the sense that she's letting you be here, not because she's obligated to, but because she chooses to. You're in her presence by invitation, not entitlement, and somehow you feel safer than you've felt all night. Because while other gods are busy weighing hearts or sling solar barges through the underworld, Bastet is already where you are, in the house, by the door, on the windowsill, in that dark hallway where your cat suddenly stares at something unseen and then, just as quickly, curls up and purrs. You don't know what was there, but she does, and she handled it. So go ahead, let your muscles relax, let your thoughts slow. Bastet is watching, not judging, just watching. And if anything dares to disturb your rest tonight, they'll have to get through her first. The sun is hot, not the warm, drowsy kind that kisses your skin and invites a nap in the shade. No, this sun burns. It presses down on your shoulders like judgment. The sky feels closer, heavier, like it's made of iron. Even the air tastes scorched. You're not near the Nile anymore. You're in the Red Lands now. The desert, the raw edge of existence where nothing grows unless it's clawed its way up through rock and survived. And something is coming. You feel it before you see it. A vibration in the sand, a pulse in the horizon. The kind of thing your instincts catch before your eyes do. Then, in a blur of heat and dust, she steps out. Sekhmet, lioness goddess of war. Fire, healing, and utterly untamable rage. She's not gentle, not even a little. She doesn't purr like Bastet. She growls, and it's low and dangerous, like a rock slide waiting for gravity's permission. She's a woman with the head of a lioness, sun disk blazing above her crown, and a glare so intense you feel your spine straighten without thinking. Sekhmet doesn't arrive. She erupts. And believe it or not, she's Ra's idea. Here's how it goes. Ra, growing old and cranky, finds humanity a little too rebellious for his liking. They've stopped respecting the gods, stopped following the divine order. Chaos is creeping in, and Ra decides it's time to teach the world a lesson. So he sends Sekhmet, not to negotiate, not to persuade, to punish. And oh, she does. She descends like a wildfire, tearing through the land with divine fury. Her claws are righteous, her breath is flame. Wherever she walks, cities fall silent, temples crumble, rivers run red. Not metaphorically, literally. The sand drinks the blood she spills. It's not battle, it's cleansing. By the time the gods realize they might have made a mistake, it's almost too late. Sekhmet doesn't stop. She forgets why she started. Rage feeds on rage, and the line between justice and vengeance blurs. Ra panics, the other gods scatter. No one can stand in her way, except for a barrel of beer. Yes, beer. Here's your quirky fact for the night. To stop Sekhmet, the gods brew thousands of jugs of beer, mix it with red ochre to mimic blood, and pour it over the desert. When she sees the pools of red, she assumes they're more victims and starts drinking, and drinking, and drinking. The goddess of war passes out drunk, face down in a puddle of what is essentially ancient Egyptian IPA. And when she wakes up, she's no longer the destroyer, she's calmer, changed. Some say that's when she becomes Bastet, her rage transmuted into gentleness. Others say she simply retreats, satisfied. Either way, the bloodletting stops. It's funny in a mythic sort of way how the goddess of war is defeated not by a hero, not by a divine weapon, but by liquor. It's the kind of story that sticks in the cultural memory for thousands of years. Even today, some Egyptian festivals honouring Sekhmet's gentler side included drinking rituals, where participants would imbibe heavily to become like Sekhmet, but hopefully stop before the rampage part. But don't get too comfortable. Sekhmet never disappears entirely. She lingers just beneath the surface, the lioness you don't see until it's too late. In medicine, she becomes the force of both sickness and healing, bringing plague when balance falters and curing it when you've learned your lesson. Her name literally means the powerful one, and the Egyptians meant every syllable. In battle, soldiers prayed to her. Doctors called on her in times of plague. Pharaohs evoked her when they needed to assert dominance. She wasn't worshipped to be loved. She was worshipped to be respected, maybe even feared. Now, here's where scholars start to squabble. Some argue that Sekhmet was always a necessary counterbalance to Ma'at, chaos applied in service of order. Others think she represents the uncontainable aspects of divine wrath, a warning that even the gods can lose control. There's even debate over whether Sekhmet and Bastet were originally one goddess that split over time, or if they were always distinct. Two feline forces on opposite ends of the divine emotional spectrum. Either way, their temples stood in different regions. Bastet ruled Bubastis with her temples of music and joy. Sekhmet had hers in Memphis, often placed near healing centres, which seems ironic until you realise that the best healers often understand destruction intimately. You can't treat a wound unless you've seen one up close, and now you're standing in front of one of her statues, massive, imposing, made of black granite so smooth it feels like water under your fingers. She stares forward unmoving, with eyes carved to pierce the soul. Hundreds of these statues were made during the reign of Amenhotep III. Some say they were meant to protect him. Others say they were placed around the land to hold her in place, to trap her rage in stone. They didn't destroy Sekhmet. They just gave her form. Which is kind of what all of Egyptian mythology does. Take the untouchable, the chaotic, the divine, and wrap it in something human-shaped, so you can point to it and say, there, that's what that feeling looks like. Sekhmet is anger, and justice, and healing, and danger. She's the fire in your chest when you've had enough, the flood of power that comes after long silence. She is what happens when balance is enforced. And right now she's watching you, not with malice, with precision. She sees everything you've held in, everything you're afraid to burn down, and she doesn't judge it, she just acknowledges it. Let her. Let yourself feel a little wild tonight, a little untamed. Let the anger rise and cool. Let the fear dissolve into knowing. You're not here to be consumed by fire, but to remember that you carry it. Now breathe deep. The air is still hot, but there's peace in it now. The kind that comes after destruction. The kind that leaves room for rebuilding. Sekhmet closes her eyes, and somewhere far away a healing begins. It's cooler now, not cold, just a relief from the desert heat. The sky is still high and cloudless, but the sun feels kinder, like it's wrapped in silk instead of steel. The tension from Sekhmet's rampage has passed, and you can feel it in your muscles too. They've unclenched, just a little. Your shoulders drop, your jaw relaxes, and from somewhere in the distance you hear music. A soft clink of sistrums, a ripple of laughter, a voice humming something too ancient to understand. You follow it. Through a long corridor of papyrus reeds, over smooth sun-warmed stone, you arrive at a celebration. A feast is underway. Grapes hang heavy from woven baskets, beer froths in clay jars. Someone is pouring pomegranate wine into a gold cup that catches the sunlight like it's its own tiny sun. And there, at the centre of it all, dancing barefoot in a circle of women and musicians, is Hathor. She glows, not sparkly, not in a glittery, manufactured kind of way, but radiantly, like joy made visible. Her dress is simple, flowing linen. Her jewellery is bright but soft, never gaudy. On her head, the sun disk rests between a pair of cow horns, a symbol you've seen before but never quite understood until now. She moves like water, smiles like she means it. You're safe here. You know that instinctively. Hathor is the goddess of love, beauty, music, joy, fertility, drunkenness, and maternal care. Basically, all the best parts of being alive. She's often shown with a cow's head or cow ears, which doesn't sound flattering, until you realise the cow wasn't just a farm animal in ancient Egypt. It was a symbol of abundance, of nourishment, of endless provision. To be cow-like was to be comforting, steady, divine. Hathor isn't the sharp discipline of Ma'at, or the righteous rage of Sekhmet. She's the exhale, the warm bath, the moment you hear your favourite song and can't help but sway to it. But don't mistake softness for weakness. Hathor has weight. In the mythologies, she's beloved by gods and mortals alike. She was considered the mother of the pharaoh, the one who nursed the king not just with milk but with sacred legitimacy. She holds the world not with force but with sweetness, like the way a child clutches their blanket and knows, deep in their bones, that they are loved. And oh, she's everywhere. There were more temples to Hathor than almost any other goddess. One of the most famous stands at Dendera, carved with images of her smiling face and crowned with that iconic sun disk. The temple ceiling is painted with stars and astrological charts, as if the cosmos themselves were a reflection of her mood. People came to Dendyra to seek healing, music, prophecy, and occasionally a really excellent party. Because yes, Hathor liked a good party. In fact, she was often invoked during festivals and celebrations. Her worshippers would dance, play instruments, wear elaborate wigs and makeup, drink heavily, and laugh until they cried. Not because they were being frivolous, but because Hathor wanted them to. Joy wasn't a luxury in ancient Egypt, it was a spiritual act. Celebrating was a way of thanking the gods for letting you live another day, another season, another moment. Here's your quirky fact for tonight. In one version of the myth, when Sekhmet goes on her bloody rampage and drinks the beer-dyed red to calm down, she transforms into Hathor. The lioness becomes the lover. Rage becomes delight. This duality is everything. The same goddess who burns cities to the ground can also rock a child to sleep. And it makes you wonder, how often does fury hide a longing for peace? How often is destruction just a scream for softness? Scholars love to debate this crossover. Was Hathor originally her own being, or just a tamed form of Sekhmet? Some argue that they represent a cosmic cycle, anger, that leads to celebration, destruction, followed by rebirth. Others say they're two sides of womanhood, or even humanity itself, the wild and the warm, the predator and the nurturer, forever bound together in an uneasy but essential truce. Hathor also had celestial significance. She was called a Lady of the Stars, and sometimes even depicted as the sky itself, swallowing the sun each night and birthing it every morning. Yes, a role shared with Nut, because in Egyptian mythology, job descriptions are very fluid, and everyone's multitasking. But her connection to the sky wasn't cold or distant. It was motherly. Imagine the whole sky wrapping around you like a lullaby. And here's something else. Hathor was the goddess who greeted the dead when they passed into the afterlife. You weren't just handed off to Anubis and Osiris like a package to be sorted. No, Hathor met you at the gates. She offered you beer, music, and welcome. She was the reminder that death was not just judgment, but also reunion. You were coming home. So now you sit beside her in this open-air court, a soft breeze on your face, the sound of laughter drifting like incense. She hands you a cup, not too full, not too strong, just enough. And when she smiles at you, you get the feeling that all the broken things inside you aren't being ignored. They are being seen and held and told you're still welcome here. The world has gods for everything, sky, sun, chaos, death. But Hathor, she's the goddess you call on when you've survived all of it and want to feel alive again. So rest now with full belly and full heart. Let the music roll over you like a wave. Let the sweetness stay a little longer than you think it should. You don't need to be at war tonight. You don't need to prove anything. You're enough exactly as you are. And Hathor is dancing. You're still basking in Hathor's warmth when the light shifts, just slightly. The shadows stretch a little longer, and the music seems to drift behind you like a dream fading with morning. It's not frightening, though, not abrupt. It's more like a gentle clearing of the throat in the middle of laughter. A presence steps forward, not to interrupt, but to anchor, enter Ptah. And if you've never heard of him, well, that's kind of his thing. Ptah doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to throw lightning or hurl solar boats through the sky. He just thinks, and the world rearranges itself to make it true. This is the god of creation by mind, the divine architect, the silent artisan who brings the universe into being not by war or love or blood, but by speech. No, scratch that. Not even speech. Intention. Ptah speaks the world into being, yes, but only after shaping it with thought and heart. In some myths, he is the first. Older than Ra, older than Atum. He's there before things had shape, quietly crafting existence like a potter at his wheel. No mess, no flair, just steady hands and unshakable will. You find yourself in a hall that feels more like a workshop than a temple. Stone columns rise like pillars in a quarry. The air smells faintly of limestone and old wood. No incense here, no dancing girls, just blueprints drawn in the air with lines of gold. Diagrams of gods and humans, temples and cities, sacred geometry spinning in perfect balance. And there's Ptah, seated but never idle. His skin is deep green, symbol of rebirth and regeneration. And he wears a tight skull cap, his body wrapped in a close-fitting robe, like a mummy or a sculpture just before it's finished being carved. He holds a scepter that combines three powerful symbols: the wearer's authority, the Ankh, life, and the Djed, stability. Altogether, it's a cosmic multi-tool because of course it is. He doesn't speak to you, not in words. He doesn't need to. You feel him in the floor beneath your feet, in the humming silence of a thought before it becomes action. Ptah is most closely associated with the city of Memphis. No, not the one in Tennessee, though that would be a great twist. Ancient Memphis was the capital of early dynastic Egypt, and Ptah was its patron god, revered by craftsmen, builders, and creators of all types. If you made things, furniture, statues, tools, dreams, Ptah was your guy. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but when a pharaoh needed a temple, or a scribe needed the right words, or an artisan needed a steady hand, they called on Ptah. Here's your quirky fact for tonight. The word Egypt itself may derive from Hut-Kap-Ptah, meaning the house of the Ka, spirit of Ptah. Yeah, the whole name of the nation may have started with this quiet, green-skinned god sketching creation behind the scenes. And here's the part that makes your brain do a little somersault. Ptah didn't just create the world. He dreamed it into coherence. He imagined the gods. He designed Ma'at. He crafted the spells that Thoth would later write down. He didn't wield the sun. He just made sure it had a reason to rise. Some scholars argue that Ptah represents the mind of God, not the body, not the voice, but the pure, unshaped intention that comes before creation. He's often compared to the Logos in Greek philosophy, the divine word, or even the quantum concept of potentiality. Ptah exists in that space between nothing and something, the moment when reality holds its breath before becoming real. Other scholars think Ptah was a craftsman's god first, a patron of the working class, whose mythology expanded as Memphis grew in political power, that his philosophical depth came later, added by scribes trying to match him with their more dramatic sky gods. But whether he started as a humble forged spirit or the embodiment of divine thought, Ptah endured, and maybe that's the point. He is endurance, not in battle but in form, in will, in the quiet power of building, shaping, making. He teaches that to create is sacred, that to build with care is an act of worship, that the universe isn't just some accident of noise and chaos. It was crafted, and it's still being crafted, by us, the artists, the thinkers, the quiet ones who sit with their tools and try to put shape to the formless. You walk now through his temple, touching the cool carved stones, each one placed by human hands, each one designed by someone who whispered a little prayer to Ptah as they smoothed the edges. You imagine them now, stonemasons, engineers, apprentices, all part of the sacred process. Not divine, just devoted. And that's where Ptah lives, not in thunder or fire, but in intention. He is the breath before the sculptor strikes the chisel. The vision in the architect's eye before the cornerstone is laid. The moment you close your eyes, picture something beautiful and feel your hands itch to make it real. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, let your thoughts build. Let your dreams sketch temples in the sky, carve gods from clouds, shape stars with your fingertips. You don't need to shout them into being, just hold them with care. Let them hum quietly in your chest. Ptah is listening, and he approves. The sky above you is dark now, midnight blue, deep and still, dotted with stars that don't blink so much as watch. The air feels different here. Not heavy, not cold, just attentive. You're standing in a field somewhere beyond cities and temples, out in the sacred in-between. And all around you the world is humming with quiet potential. You don't know where you are, but you know someone is coming. You look up, and there, stepping gently across the night like it's water, is Khonsu, the moon god, the wanderer, the traveller in white. He's dressed in linen that glows faintly, not reflecting the moonlight, but being it. His head is shaven smooth, like a young boy or a priest, and atop it rests a full moon cradled and in the arms of a crescent, soft, glowing and perfectly still. His eyes are dark and old, not tired but knowing, the kind of gaze that sees all your secrets and isn't shocked by any of them. Khonsu doesn't rush. He never does. He takes his time. The moon isn't in a hurry. In Egyptian mythology, Khonsu is the god of the moon, yes, but he's also so much more than that. He's time, healing, movement and magic, all wrapped up in a figure that never stays still for long. He travels across the sky every night, just like Ra does during the day. But unlike Ra's solar drama with fiery boats and chaos serpents, Khonsu's journey is quieter, subtler. He slips through the hours, and sometimes he heals what the sun couldn't. There's a famous story, one of the few times Khonsu gets the spotlight. It comes from a stele known as the Bentresh stele, and it tells of a foreign princess, the sister of a royal woman married into Egypt who falls deathly ill. No healer can save her, so the pharaoh sends for the god himself. Khonsu is summoned in the form of a statue, carried in a sacred bark, accompanied by priests and offerings and hymns. As soon as he enters the foreign land, the girl is cured. The spirit tormenting her flees, terrified. The people rejoice. The king begs Khonsu to stay forever, and for a while he does. He lingers in the land for over 3 years before finally returning to Egypt. Not because he's ordered to, because he chooses to. He's a guest, a healer, and a mystery. This story made Khonsu famous as a god of healing, not just light. His temples became places of recovery and purification. People would sleep inside them, hoping the god would appear in dreams to diagnose their ailments or bless them with the strength to heal. It's like an ancient version of dream therapy, except the therapist is the moon and sometimes shows up with a lion-headed sidekick. Here's your quirky fact of the night. Khonsu's name means to travel, or pathfinder, which feels about right. He's the god of movement, of passing through spaces, of making journeys sacred. Every time the moon waxes or wanes, he's telling a story in phases, and you, yes you, are part of it. He also has a darker side, though we rarely talk about it. In the pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings of ancient Egypt, Khonsu is sometimes described as a bloodthirsty deity who devours hearts and drinks the blood of enemies. Yeah, the soft-faced moon god has a sharp edge. But it makes sense when you think about the moon, not just as a symbol of calm, but as something constantly shifting, sometimes hidden, sometimes full, always watching. Scholars aren't quite sure how all these aspects of Khonsu fit together. Some argue that he was originally a lunar warrior god, more violent, more direct, and softened over time as the myths evolved. Others say his darker traits were always just metaphors for the cleansing power of the moon, which sees what the sun can't and purifies by silence instead of fire. And then there's the connection to Thoth, the other major moon god in Egyptian mythology. They're often linked, sometimes even merged, depending on the period. Thoth is the intellectual, the scribe, the calculator of time. Khonsu is the motion of it. Where Thoth sets the calendar, Khonsu walks through it, leaving footprints on each night. You stand beside him now in this vast, quiet field and you realize the world hasn't stopped. It's just paused, held in his soft, cool light. He reaches up with one hand, and with a motion so smooth it doesn't seem possible, he plucks a star from the sky and places it into your palm. It's not hot, it doesn't burn, it glows faintly, like a nightlight in the hand of a child. You don't know what it means yet, but it feels important. Khonsu doesn't explain, he never does. He just smiles, almost mischievous. The kind of smile that says, you'll understand later, and you probably will. Because Khonsu isn't here to teach with lectures or parables. He teaches through paths, through wandering, through letting you drift off course and discover something better than you were looking for. He's the god of the nighttime road trip, of healing that takes its time, of magic that doesn't need to announce itself to work. So tonight, when your dreams start to shimmer and bend, don't fight it. Let them move, let them shift, let Khonsu guide you through whatever strange, wonderful terrain your sleeping mind decides to paint. He's been doing this for thousands of years, and he's not about to stop now. The moonlight fades behind you now, not gone, just slipping behind the veil. As Khonsu disappears into the night sky, your feet touch ground that feels different, thicker, softer, wet. You blink and realize you're standing on the banks of the Nile, but not the gentle, meandering river you've grown used to. No, this part of the Nile moves with purpose. It churns, it surges, it warns you, not with words but with motion. And from the center of that motion, rising like the river's own heartbeat, comes Sobek. You hear him before you see him, that low, throaty rumble that sounds like both thunder and laughter. Then the water splits, and the crocodile god emerges, massive, dripping, radiant in the strangest way. He's not shiny or golden like Ra or sleek and soft like Bastet. He's raw, primal, a walking embodiment of river muscle and survival instinct. Sobek is often shown as a man with the head of a crocodile, sometimes fully crocodilian. His skin gleams wet black-green, and his smile is all teeth and ancient power. He doesn't slither, he doesn't sneak. He walks right up, bold as anything, and stands where the earth meets the water like he owns the lease. Because, in a way, he does. Sobek is the god of the Nile, of fertility, military strength, protection, and crocodiles, obviously. But he's not just the god of crocs, he is the crocodile. The one sliding beneath the papyrus reeds. The one that sunbathes on the bank with eyes half closed, waiting. The one that launches from the water so fast you never even see it coming. And somehow people loved him for it. You'd think a crocodile-headed god wouldn't be the warmest or most beloved figure in Egyptian theology, but Sobek had entire cities dedicated to him. Most famously Crocodilopolis. Yes, that was a real place in the Fayum region. There, Sobek was not only worshipped, but served. Priests tended to live crocodiles in sacred pools, fed them the finest cuts of meat and adorned them with gold and jewels. One particularly spoiled croc, called Petsuchos, lived in luxury, treated like royalty, and when he died, another was chosen to take his place. You can't help but smile. It's such a weird and wonderful image. Humans carefully wrapping jewellery around a literal crocodile's neck while murmuring prayers. But that was the point. Fear turned into reverence. The ancient Egyptians didn't try to destroy what scared them, they gave it a throne. Because Sobek wasn't just violence, he was protection too. Picture a soldier going into battle. They might carry an amulet of Sobek on their chest, believing he would lend them the strength of the river, the teeth of the predator. Or imagine a mother praying to Sobek to guard her child on a boat ride down the Nile. He was called upon during floods, wars, illnesses. Any time life got a little too wild, Sobek was your guy. Here's your quirky fact. Some myths say Sobek helped in the creation of the world by raising it up from the primeval waters, not as a builder like Ptah, not as a thinker like Thaith, but as the force that lifted the land itself, jaws snapping open, hoisting earth into the light. Imagine that, the world rising from the back of a divine croc. And here's the scholarly rabbit hole. Sobek is one of the few gods whose public image shifted dramatically over time. Early on, he was a terrifying figure, aggressive, unpredictable, maybe even chaotic. But as Egypt evolved, especially during the Middle Kingdom, he gained status as a creator, a protector, and even became merged with Ra as Sobek Ra. This combo god represented the unstoppable power of nature paired with the divine logic of the sun. Basically, he became an apex predator and an enlightened cosmic force. Duality, baby. The Egyptians couldn't get enough of it. And Sobek himself? He doesn't explain, he doesn't justify. He stands ankle deep in the Nile watching you with those slow blinking reptile eyes, and you get it. You understand suddenly what it means to be both feared and necessary, both sacred and deadly. Sobek doesn't want your praise, he wants your respect. He is the moment you almost stepped on something in the water and jumped back, heart pounding. He's the chill you get looking into murky depths. He's the reminder that nature isn't tame and shouldn't be. But don't mistake his sharp teeth for cruelty. There's tenderness in Sobek in his own way. In some myths, he's even linked to the care of Horus, helping to retrieve parts of Osiris, or guarding the child god while he was hidden in the marshes. His protective streak runs deep, like the Nile itself. He's not just a killer, he's a guardian, a provider, a river god who knows the power of flowing between opposites. And in the real world, the Nile itself, lifeblood of Egypt, was full of crocodiles. Yet people still sailed, still fished, still prayed. Because that's what the Egyptians understood better than most cultures. The things that can kill you often give you life too. So here you stand, watching Sobek fade back into the river. The water calms behind him, like a curtain settling after a scene change. The stars reflect in the ripples. Somewhere in the reeds, a frog croaks. Life resumes. And you understand something now, that divinity doesn't always wear a serene smile or speak in riddles. Sometimes it growls, sometimes it waits beneath the surface, and sometimes it has teeth. The air is thick with scent. Damp earth, crushed lotus, something faintly metallic, and it's warmer now, like a body curled around you. The Nile has faded behind, replaced by a low glowing horizon that pulses like a heartbeat. You're walking through a narrow corridor now, but not of stone, of papyrus, mud brick and magic. A passage lined with symbols older than language and whispers older than memory. You're deep in the domestic realm, the world of women and birth and blood and breath, and waddling toward you, massive, maternal, and utterly unfazed, is Taweret. Yes, that's a hippopotamus, standing upright, with the back of a crocodile and the paws of a lion. And yes, she looks like she just left a fight and won, then made you soup anyway. Taweret is one of the oldest and most beloved protective deities in all of Egyptian mythology, and she does not care if she looks ridiculous. She is the guardian of pregnancy, childbirth, mothers, and babies, and that means she walks with divine authority, despite being the spiritual equivalent of an angry bouncer in a bathrobe. Her face is blunt, her teeth huge, her belly round and proudly swollen. She leans heavily on her Ese symbol, the looped staff of protection. Her breasts hang full and heavy with milk, and her eyes are alert, scanning every corner of the world for danger. She isn't graceful, she's formidable, and you love her immediately. Because Taweret isn't polished like Isis. She's not celestial like Nut or calculating like Maat. She is real, grounded, sweating through the process. You want her in your corner when life gets messy, when water breaks, when pain hits, when everything feels like it's falling apart and someone needs to hold your hand and say, "You're not dying, you're just being born." This is her domain. You enter a birthing chamber. It's small, shadowy, warm. You see a woman in labour, surrounded by midwives and murmuring prayers. On every wall, etched into the plaster and painted in faded blues and ochres, are images of Taweret. Over and over, always. She appears, hands raised, mouth open mid-roar, eyes wild and fearless. Her presence fills the space, not delicate but sacred, because in ancient Egypt birth was dangerous. Bleeding could be fatal. Infection was a death sentence. And so childbirth wasn't just a medical event, it was a battlefield. Women went to war with their own bodies to bring forth life, and Taweret was the one who walked beside them. She didn't do it alone, of course, she had her squad. Other protective deities like Bes, you'll meet him soon, formed a whole security detail for newborns. But Taweret was the front line, the barrier between you and the thing lurking just beyond the candlelight, the one who snarled at demons, snapped her crocodile tail, and dared chaos to cross her line. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Taweret statues were everywhere, in homes, on headboards, carved into perfume bottles, and even worn as protective amulets by pregnant women. Sometimes her image was painted on the walls of labour rooms, right above the mat where women squatted to give birth. She wasn't a formal temple goddess. She belonged to the people, to the bedrooms and cradleside prayers, to the quiet corners where real life happened. She wasn't soft-spoken, but she was soft-hearted. She was what you get when love refuses to be passive. And that brings us to the strange paradox of her form. Why would a hippo, an animal known for unpredictable aggression, become the ultimate symbol of maternal protection? Because of how hippos behave. In the wild, female hippos are terrifying. They're intensely protective of their young. They'll charge crocodiles, overturn boats, and maul anything that gets too close. The ancient Egyptians saw this and said, "Yes, that's our girl." They weren't looking for a graceful swan to guard their children. They wanted a hippo in war paint. And it worked. Taweret wasn't just a comfort, she was a deterrent. To ward off miscarriages, illness, and evil spirits, people invoked her name. They wore her face around their necks, rubbed her image into the walls with ochre, whispered her titles in the dark. And if you think that's outdated, just remember how many of us still clutch things in labour rooms, rosaries, teddy bears, hands. We all still pray to something when the pain gets sharp enough. Some scholars debate whether Taweret started as a full goddess, or was originally a demoness, later softened by domestic worship. Others believe she's part of a trinity of goddesses with similar features, all grouped together under the umbrella of hippo protectors. Still others argue that her animal form is symbolic of the chaotic Nile and fertility itself, life-giving and dangerous at the same time. But the truth is, no one quite knows when she emerged. She was just always there, watching. In one myth, she guards the Tree of Life. In another, she helps Ra fend off demons during his night journey through the underworld. Always protecting, always near. Rarely the star of the story, but always in the wings, claws out. You sit now at the foot of her statue, one of the smaller ones maybe, a house shrine. Her eyes catch the light of a flickering lamp. You can almost hear her breathing, slow, steady, unwavering. She doesn't ask you to be brave, she just is. So you lean into her presence, let your chest rise and fall with hers, Let yourself feel guarded, not judged. Safe, not small. You don't have to prove anything here. You don't even have to speak. Towerette's watching the door, and no one's getting past her. The air buzzes with a kind of low, anxious energy, like something is about to happen, or already is, and you just haven't caught up yet. The ground beneath your feet feels closer somehow, less distant, more alive. You've left the birthing chamber, but not the realm of protection. No, you've simply taken a sharp turn into something wilder, something with a crooked grin and a club in one hand, something that doesn't knock before it enters, because it already knows the place is safe with him around. You're about to meet Bess, and honestly, you don't see him right away. You hear him. A snort, a deep-throated laugh, the sound of tiny bells jangling with no rhythm. Then, like a goblin leaping out of a dream, he appears, short, stocky, round-bellied, with wild hair, a lion's mane for a beard, a tongue sticking out and eyes that seem to look right through you and still find something funny. Bess isn't like the other gods. He's not sleek, he's not elegant, he's not wrapped in linen or crowned with sun discs. Bess is barefoot, shirtless, and proudly unbothered. He looks like he just woke up, beat up a demon, comforted a baby, and made a joke about it, all before breakfast. And the weirdest part? He walks toward you, full face forward. That's rare in Egyptian art. Most gods are shown in profile, oh, see you, but Bess breaks the rules. He stares straight out of the image, daring you to look away. You don't. You can't. He's the god of childbirth, music, dancing, sex, laughter, sleep, and protection against evil spirits. You know, the usual light responsibilities. In households across Egypt, Bess was everywhere, painted above beds, carved onto furniture, worn as amulets, even tattooed on dancers and musicians. He was personal, intimate, domestic in the deepest sense of the word. If you had Bess in your home, it meant someone in your house had prayed for joy, or protection, or a night of uninterrupted sleep, because that was his job, to guard the vulnerable, especially women and children, from the things that crept in after dark. Nightmares, illness, demons, the kind of fears that don't respond to reason. Bess didn't reason. He growled, he danced, he made noise, he chased the bad things away by being too loud, too weird, too joyfully alive to tolerate darkness. And that made him essential. You sit with him now, in a room that feels half like a nursery, half like a tiny tavern. A lullaby plays on one side, a flute solo on the other. Bess sits cross-legged on the floor, sharpening a knife with one hand and tickling a baby's foot with the other. His eyes flick to you, and with zero formality he offers you a stool carved like a lion's paw. Then he burps, loudly. Welcome to the inner circle. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Bess may have foreign origins. His style, features, and upright stance all suggest influence from sub-Saharan Africa or Nubia. Some scholars believe he was adopted into Egyptian religion from neighbouring cultures and gradually took on more and more importance. Instead of being confined to a priesthood or temple, he thrived in the home, in bedrooms and kitchens, places the official gods rarely touched. He was the people's god, and the people loved him for it. There were no huge temples to Bess, no pharaohs dedicating cities to his name. But try to find a single household without his face somewhere in it. Impossible. He was the god who knew what scared you at 2 a.m. and who also knew exactly how to make it go away. It's easier to overlook joy, easier to call it frivolous, especially when the world is heavy and complicated. But Bess didn't care about propriety. He cared about keeping your kids alive and making you laugh when you thought you'd forgotten how. In a pantheon full of radiant gods and cosmic metaphors, Bess is a reminder that sometimes the sacred is small and silly and covered in fur. Scholars have tried to place him neatly in the mythological hierarchy, but he resists classification. Some call him a dwarf deity, others a demon turned good. His name might come from the word Bessa, meaning to protect, or from older, forgotten roots. But he doesn't mind the confusion. He just shows up at births, at weddings, on the edges of your sleep, and stays. In one tradition, Bess is said to shout as a baby is being born, scaring off the evil forces trying to slip into the room during such a vulnerable moment. In others, he's the one who sings lullabies while sharpening his blade, making sure nothing sneaks in through the window. Protection always, but not solemn. Protective joy. And maybe that's his real power. Not just chasing away fear, but replacing it with something better. Laughter that rattles the windows, music that wakes the baby with a giggle, dancing that makes your bones forget how tired they are. Bess reminds you that divinity doesn't have to be remote or untouchable. Sometimes it's sweaty and weird and deeply inappropriate, and exactly what you need. You lean back on your stool now, watching him toss a clay rattle into the air and catch it behind his back. He grins, mouth wide, eyes crinkled. There's a scar above his left eyebrow. You're pretty sure it has a story. You're also pretty sure he'd tell it over 3 drinks and a drum solo. And just like that, the space around you feels lighter, safer. Not because the danger's gone, but because someone is on watch. So tonight as you sleep, imagine Bess sitting at the foot of your bed, knife in hand, smile on his face, ready to pounce on whatever shadows creep close. Ready to laugh while he does it. No dark thing stands a chance. It's strange how quiet it gets after Bess leaves the room, like the air's holding its breath, or the laughter just echoed itself into stillness. You sit there for a moment, feeling that cozy safety still wrapped around your shoulders like a warm blanket, but something pulls you forward, not in a hurry, more like a whisper, trailing just ahead of your steps, leading you deeper into the folds of myth. And this time, you're heading somewhere colder. Not frightening, just still. You're moving through a space of records now, shelves upon shelves of tablets and scrolls, each one humming with quiet authority. Lamps flicker without wind. The walls are carved top to bottom with glyphs so precise it feels like they could crawl off the stone and rewrite themselves if you blink too long. And at the centre of it all, seated at a polished stone desk that glows with its own inner light, is Thoth. He doesn't look up right away. He's writing, obviously. His long ibis beak dips toward the page, quill dancing across a parchment that looks older than air. His eyes flick, left to right, absorbing everything and forgetting nothing. His skin is cool grey, his posture precise. When he does glance at you, it's not unfriendly, just deeply aware. He already knows why you're here. He probably knew before you did. Thoth is the god of wisdom, writing, science, magic, and the moon. Yes, Khonsu's got competition. But where Khonsu is a wanderer, Thoth is an anchor. He is the ledger, the equation, the footnote and the theorem and the punchline written in hieroglyphs so dense they take 3 lifetimes to decode. He's the one who wrote the words that created the gods. Let that sink in for a second. In some myths, Thoth didn't just record divine law, he was the one who spoke it into form. He invented writing, invented language itself. His ink wasn't just pigment, it was divine substance capable of reshaping reality, which means in the Egyptian mind the written word wasn't just a record of power, it was power. And that's why Thoth is everywhere. He's in the tombs, guiding the dead through the underworld with spells written on the walls. He's in the temples, carving records of rituals into stone. He's perched over the shoulder of every scribe, whispering which glyph goes next. Here's your quirky fact. Thoth was said to have authored the legendary Book of Thoth, a magical text that held secrets of the universe, spells that could let you talk to animals, control the gods, or even raise the dead. Of course, the book was hidden, because humanity wasn't ready, and every time someone in the myths found it, bad things happened. You know, like accidentally unleashing a wave of curses, or getting possessed by a snake spirit. Classic magical literature problems. But Thoth isn't reckless with knowledge. He's Cephal. He measures everything. In fact, when it came time to weigh the hearts of the dead, Thoth was there, pen in hand, standing next to Anubis, carefully recording the results. He didn't decide fate. He just tracked it, objectively. No drama, no judgment, just math. And yes, he's also a moon god. In some stories, when the sky needed a light to balance the fiery dominance of Ra's sun, Thoth stepped up, not because he wanted to outshine anyone, but because the world needed balance. That's his whole thing, equilibrium. If Ra burns, Thoth cools. If chaos grows, Thoth calculates. If memory fades, Thoth writes. Scholars have argued for centuries about where Thoth came from. Some place his worship as far back as pre-dynastic Egypt, while others think his character developed alongside the rise of writing itself. He's closely associated with Hermopolis, a city that the Greeks later named after him, since they equated Thoth with Hermes, their own scribe and trickster god. In fact, the fusion of Thoth and Hermes birthed a whole mystical tradition, Hermeticism, full of cosmic metaphysics, divine geometry, and enough alchemical riddles to make your brain sweat. But despite all that abstraction, Thoth never feels distant. He's the god of scribes, remember? Of bureaucrats, accountants, engineers, librarians, people with ink-stained fingers and eyes strained from candlelight. He isn't aloof, he's in the margins, in the footnotes, in the space where an idea becomes real. And he's not humorless. He invented writing, which means he also invented jokes. In one legend, he gambles with the moon god Khonsu and wins extra light, using it to build up a new calendar system. In another, he outsmarts angry gods by tricking them into peace. He's logic with flair, wit wrapped in ritual, the kind of mind that sharpens itself for fun and then uses that edge to cut through fate's most tangled knots. He's also sometimes shown as a baboon. Yep, you thought ibis was weird? Baboons were sacred to him too. Why? Because the Egyptians noticed that baboons seemed to talk to the sunrise, chattering at dawn like little sky worshippers. So of course they belonged to Thoth, the cosmic chatterbox. Now you sit across from him. He doesn't speak, but he slides a sheet of papyrus toward you. It's blank. A quill appears in your hand. You don't remember picking it up. He gestures. You understand. It's your turn to write. Not your legacy, not your destiny, just your thoughts, your truth, your moment, because that's the lesson Thoth offers. That writing isn't just for gods, that knowledge doesn't have to be divine to be sacred. That the act of recording something, anything, is a form of resistance against forgetting, against decay, against the chaos always waiting just outside the walls of memory. So you write, a word, a name, a feeling, and Thoth watches, calm, approving. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to mean it. Your hand lingers over the parchment for a moment longer, the ink still drying, as if the act of writing has pulled something deep from you, some truth you didn't know you'd been carrying around. Thoth nods, more to himself than to you, and gently rolls up the scroll, tucking it into a space on the shelf that wasn't there a moment ago. You leave his chamber slowly, like stepping out of a long thought, and the world blurs a little before resolving into something entirely new. The air thickens, the light dims, not in menace, but in intimacy, like candlelight during a storm. You're walking down a narrow corridor carved into ancient stone, the walls cool and sweating with time. This is a temple, clearly, but not one made for crowds or declarations. It's for ritual, for resurrection, for secrets whispered so long ago, they've wrapped around themselves and become sacred again. And in the center of it all, rising from the shadows with a presence that presses on your chest like both gravity and grace, stands Isis. You feel her before you see her. The mother, the magician, the queen of gods and throne of kings. She's standing calmly, tall and radiant in a linen gown that flows like the Nile in flood season. Her headdress is unmistakable, either the hieroglyphic throne or the solar disk between cow horns, both symbols of her unshakable place in the cosmic order. Her eyes are dark and endless, not unreadable, just patient. Isis doesn't move quickly. She doesn't need to. When she turns her gaze toward you, it's like being recognized by someone who already knows every version of you you've ever been. She doesn't smile, but you feel safe. Her presence carries weight, and for good reason. Isis is, without question, one of the most important and most beloved figures in all of Egyptian mythology. More than just a goddess of motherhood or magic, she is the ultimate connector, the glue holding together the broken pieces of gods and kings and stories and hearts. She is devotion made divine. You probably know her best from the story of Osiris, her husband, her brother, her partner in both life and myth. When Osiris was murdered, cut into pieces by his jealous brother Set, it was Isis who searched the earth to find him. Piece by piece she gathered his body, she mourned, she wailed. And then she did what no one else had done. She brought him back, not fully, not permanently, but enough. With her magic, her love, her refusal to give up, she resurrected him long enough to conceive their son, Horus, the falcon god who would grow to challenge Set and claim his rightful throne. And it's Isis who raises Horus in secret, hiding in the marshes, fending off snakes and sickness and despair, nursing him into strength and survival. Isis is the mother of kings. Every pharaoh from Nama to Cleopatra claimed descent from her. Her name was invoked in rituals, her magic called upon in healing, her image worn in amulets by mothers and soldiers and lovers alike. Here's your quirky fact. The name Isis comes from the Greek rendering of her original Egyptian name Aset. And even after the fall of pharaonic Egypt, her worship didn't disappear. It expanded. Her temples spread across the Mediterranean. The cult of Isis became a global religion during the Greco-Roman era, with shrines from Britain to Turkey. She outlasted emperors and borders. Even as new gods rose, Isis stayed, because you don't forget the one who put things back together. In Egyptian iconography, she's often shown with wings outstretched, kneeling at the heads of coffins, guarding the dead. Her feathers represent protection, yes, but also the power of the wind, the word, and the spell. Isis was a goddess of magic after all. Her spells weren't just poetic, they were effective. In one myth, she tricks even Ra himself by crafting a serpent and hiding it in his path. When he's bitten, only she knows the cure, forcing him to reveal his secret name, the key to divine power. She doesn't use it selfishly, but she keeps it, because Isis never forgets. And that's the scholarly debate. Was Isis always this powerful, or did her legend grow over time? Some historians argue she began as a minor goddess, primarily as Osiris's wife. Others point to early pyramid texts that already reference her as a force of major magic and protection. One thing is certain, by the time her cult matured, Isis had become everything. Wife, mother, mourner, magician, protector, queen. She became a template. For centuries, women called on her during childbirth. Men wore her symbols in battle. Merchants prayed to her for safe travel, and lovers whispered her name in hopes of rekindling lost warmth. Isis wasn't distant. She was fiercely close. She understood pain. She understood loss. She knew what it meant to wait in the dark, unsure if what you love will ever return, and she knew how to keep believing anyway. Now, you walk beside her in a garden of silence and stillness. She touches a papyrus flower, and it blooms instantly. She passes a statue, and the stone warms. She's not showy. She doesn't need to be. Her power is constant, like gravity. The kind you don't think about till it's gone. And she walks with you, as if she's always walked with you. Because maybe she has. That moment you found yourself whole again, even when no one thought you could. That was her. That breath you took after the storm? Her too. Isis is not the goddess who stops the pain. She's the one who helps you survive it. She is the spell woven into your bones that says, keep going. As you leave the temple, she doesn't say goodbye. She doesn't need to. Her hand lingers briefly on your shoulder, warm and sure, and something inside you settles. Not fixed, not finished, but possible. She steps back into shadow. Or maybe you do. Either way, the world is just a little more whole. You're not sure how long you've been walking, only that the pace has slowed. The air is heavier now, not stifling, but solemn. Not dangerous, but weighty in the way ancient things often are. The walls around you are smooth and dark, etched with carvings that shine faintly gold in the torchlight. The hieroglyphs here aren't storytelling. They're not poetry, they're rules. You've reached the place where judgment lives. And whether you're ready or not, someone is waiting for you. Mayat. She doesn't appear like the others. She doesn't descend with fire, or rise from the Nile, or step out of shadows with a dramatic soundtrack. Ma'at is simply there, already in the room when you arrive. Seated, composed, utterly unshakable. Her feather, a single white ostrich plume, rests upright in her hair, held perfectly still by a breeze you cannot feel. She looks at you, not through you, not past you, at you, the way a scale might look if it had eyes. Because Ma'at is not just a goddess, she is the concept of truth, order, justice, balance, and the proper way things are meant to be. She's not an enforcer. She doesn't swing swords or hurl punishments. She doesn't have to. She's the standard by which all things are measured. The ancient Egyptians didn't think of Ma'at as optional. They believed the universe itself only works if Ma'at is upheld, which is why even the gods follow her. She is the reason Ra's sunbark rises and sets without error. She is the reason the Nile floods in rhythm, not chaos. She is the reason a scribe's hand writes straight, a temple wall stands firm, and a heart dares to hope. Without Ma'at, everything collapses. Not in an explosion, but in rot, decay, unravelling. And that's where you are now, the Hall of Two Truths. You know it by instinct. The space is vast, stone columns fading into shadows above, as if the room never ends. A long row of gods stands in silence, some familiar, some watching you for the first time, but they are not here to judge. That task falls to Anubis and Ma'at and, eventually, Thoth standing ready to record. At the heart of it all is the scale. On one side, the feather of Ma'at, on the other, your heart. It rests there now, softly pulsing, as if still unsure whether it belongs to the world of the living or the dead. You're not afraid, not exactly, just aware. aware that this moment matters more than anything else ever has. But Mahat doesn't lean in. She doesn't instruct. She doesn't explain the rules, because you already know them. You've known them since your first breath. Don't lie, don't steal, don't murder, don't cheat. Respect the gods, respect the land, respect your neighbour. Don't tip the balance, not because someone might catch you, but because the balance matters. Here's your quirky fact of the night. The ancient Egyptians believed so deeply in Mahat that even the pharaoh's job was defined by her. To uphold Mahat was the king's primary role. Not to conquer, not to build, to preserve balance. If a ruler failed to do that, no amount of gold or victory would save them in the afterlife. Their tomb might stand tall, but their soul would crumble. And if your heart is heavier than the feather, well, you know what happens next. From the shadows creeps Amit, the devourer. A horrifying composite, head of a crocodile, body of a lion, hindquarters of a hippo. She's not a goddess, she's a force of consequence. She does not chase you. She does not bite unless called. But if your heart is found unworthy, if you've lived without Mahat, she opens her jaws and you cease to exist. No afterlife, no memory, just gone. Total obliteration, not punishment, just natural result. There's some debate, of course. Scholars argue whether Mahat was a real goddess, or just a personification of a cosmic principle. Whether the judgment scene was literal theology, or symbolic reassurance. But that's missing the point. Mahat's power isn't in her form, it's in her function. She holds everything together. She is the blueprint, the pattern, the thing we all know even when we pretend not to. She's what should be. And that's more terrifying and more comforting than any judgment you could ever face. But here's the twist. Mahat isn't only present at the end of life, she's everywhere, daily, in every action. The Egyptians believed that living with Maat, not just honouring her, but embodying her, was the secret to happiness, to health, to eternity. Temples dedicated to her held courts of justice. Her name was invoked in contracts, oaths, and even recipes. You didn't just fear Ma'at, you relied on her. Now the scales rest. Still, silent, and slowly they balance. Your heart does not sink. You exhale, because you understand now. Ma'at isn't about perfection, she's about alignment. Did you strive? Did you grow? Did you try to live truthfully, even when it hurt? The feather isn't a test you pass, it's a mirror. And tonight, the reflection is enough. Amit fades back into the dark. Thoth nods and makes his mark. Anubis folds his hands. And Ma'at, she gives the slightest nod. A gesture so small it could be missed. But it isn't. Because in that nod lives the entire permission to move forward. So you walk past the scales, not because you're flawless, but because you're real. And that is enough for Ma'at. You walk away from the scale, and the silence follows. Not the heavy kind, not the silence that suffocates, but a new kind, clean and wide and open, like the pause after a deep breath before the next inhale. You pass the judgment. You've walked the corridor of gods and monsters, memories and myths, and now, at last, you're stepping into something beyond it. And there he is, standing tall, falcon-headed, crowned with the double plumes of Upper and Lower Egypt, chest proud and arms crossed like a king, but somehow still radiating the wary alertness of someone who knows what it means to fight for every inch of ground. Horus. He doesn't move at first. He lets you come to him. You get the sense that he's been standing here a long time, watching every soul who ever made it past the judgment of Ma'at, measuring them in his own way. Not with a scale, but with a warrior's instinct, a kind of cosmic vetting. You don't speak, neither does he, but you feel something unspoken pass between you. Not a welcome, a recognition. Because Horus is not just a god, he's a survivor, a child of war, a product of loss, and the one who turned tragedy into triumph. You can feel all of it radiating off him. The pain, the anger, the patience, the grit. The falcon doesn't blink. In the mythology, Horus is the son of Isis and Osiris, born in secret after Osiris was murdered and dismembered by Set. His mother, powerful in love and magic, brought her dead husband back long enough to conceive him. Then she fled to the marshes to hide and raise her son far from Set's jealous rage. Horus was not born into peace. He was born into a vendetta, and he waited. He grew, trained, learned, always under the watchful eye of Isis, and when he was ready, He challenged Set not with reckless anger, but with divine purpose. Their battle wasn't just a fistfight. It was a full-blown cosmic war, told across endless stories with gods taking sides, judges intervening and trickery on both ends. Sometimes Horus wins quickly, other times the stories stretch into long, absurd courtroom dramas. One myth has Set and Horus debating over who's more worthy to rule Egypt, with the gods arguing for 80 years. Yes, really, Egyptian myth loved a good divine soap opera. In one version, Set tries to discredit Horus by humiliating him. In another, Horus rips off Set's testicles and tosses them into the Nile. There's eye-gouging, shape-shifting, and even a battle where Horus rides a giant hippo. It might have been metaphorical, or maybe not, who can say with Egyptian myth? But the key moment comes when Horus loses his eye. In one epic battle, Set tears out Horus's left eye, the Eye of Horus, also called the Wedjat. It's a devastating blow, not just physically, but symbolically. The eye represents vision, clarity, divine sight. Losing it meant Horus had lost part of his essence, and yet the eye is restored. In some myths, Thoth helps restore it. In others, it's Isis. But the message is always the same: wounds can be healed, and when Horus gets the eye back, he doesn't keep it. He offers it to Osiris, his dead father, as a tribute, a restoration, a bridge between life and death. And that single gesture, that moment of sacrifice and respect, is what earns Horus his throne. Not the battle, not the blood, the choice to give, to say, oh, and that's who stands before you now. Not just the god of kings, but the god of overcoming, of doing what's right even when you've already won. Horus's order restored, not because it was given to him, but because he fought for it, over years, through pain, through the loss of his eye, his innocence, and nearly everything else. That's why the pharaohs claim to be his living embodiment. Every ruler in Egypt, from the earliest dynastic kings to the final Ptolemies, linked themselves to Horus. His falcon silhouette was carved into palace walls, tombs, weapons, amulets. He wasn't just a myth. He was royalty itself. To wear the crown of Egypt was to wear the legacy of Horus, to stand where he stood, carry what he carried. But Horus wasn't only for kings. His eye, the Eye of Horus, became a universal symbol of healing, protection, and restoration. Sailors painted it on their boats, mothers wore it during childbirth, soldiers carved it into their armour. Even in death it was placed over the mummy's linen, protecting the soul's journey through the duat. And here's your quirky fact for the night. The Eye of Horus wasn't just mystical, it was mathematical. The parts of the eye were used to represent Egyptian fractions, each curve and line corresponding to a specific value, adding up to almost, but not quite, one whole. A beautiful metaphor, that some wounds never fully heal, and that wholeness isn't perfection, it's what remains after all the parts have tried. You stand now at the foot of Horus's throne. He steps down, not towering over you, but standing beside you. He's taller, yes, more radiant, absolutely, but there's no arrogance in him, only presence, power earned, grief endured, balance restored. And when he speaks, because now, finally he does, it's only 3 words: you are seen. It's not a blessing, it's not a farewell, it's just a simple truth, because Horus doesn't promise comfort. He doesn't promise ease. He promises that struggle matters and that someone has noticed. He turns, cloak catching the light, and walks toward the horizon, a horizon that feels less like an ending and more like a beginning. And you follow. Because your journey through gods and ghosts and goddesses wasn't just a tour, it was a reassembly. You've stood with Maat. You've laughed with Bess. You've been held by Taweret, guided by Thoth, healed by Khonsu, terrified by Sekhmet, and embraced by Isis. And now, with Horus watching over your shoulder and the stars opening like doors, you step forward, not into sleep, into something truer,